My name is Jessica, and I'm 49 years old. I've been married to my husband, Ethan, for 20 years. Since our son left for college in another state last year, I've had more free time. I decided to take a part-time job to help support our son's expenses. Before that, I was a stay-at-home mom, so getting back into the workforce was a big adjustment at first. But lately, I've been feeling more fulfilled, my opinions are valued at work, and I feel like I'm contributing again. Hey, Ethan, I said happily one evening, I just found out I'm getting a small raise. It feels nice to be recognized for my hard work. Ethan, who was watching TV, barely looked at me. Then, out of nowhere, he said something that made no sense. So, you're saying you can live on your own now? I looked at him, confused. What? Ethan turned toward me with a smirk, which immediately gave me a bad feeling. It's perfect timing. I've been meaning to tell you, I've got a new girlfriend. I don't need you anymore. I was stunned. He said it so casually, as if he'd just told me to pick up groceries, get the divorce papers and our marriage certificate from City Hall tomorrow, he added, still acting like it was no big deal. As his words sank in, I could feel myself shaking. Seeing my reaction, Ethan sneered, I'm still a man. Unlike you, you gave up on being a woman a long time ago. We haven't been close in ages, there's no point in staying married. I was angry and shocked by his rudeness. Yes, we hadn't been intimate in a long time, but it wasn't because I gave up on being a woman. Honestly, I just didn't feel attracted to a middle-aged man in his 50s with a bit of extra weight. Feeling a mix of anger and amusement, I started laughing. Oh, really? I said. You're the one who kept making excuses. You were too tired, too busy, or just didn't want to bother. And now suddenly you want to live as a man? That's hilarious. Ethan's smirk vanished, and he looked annoyed. What's so funny? Don't mess with me, old lady. Ethan started insulting me, using harsh, rude words. Then, leaning back with his arms crossed, he said, Ashley is so different. She's head over heels for me, always calling me the best boyfriend ever. And look at you, getting excited over a tiny raise. Pathetic. He kept boasting about Ashley, the woman he's been seeing behind my back, and made me feel small in comparison. Her name rang in my head. Ashley, Ashley, Ashley. Ethan proudly shared more about her. She's over a decade younger, in her mid-20s, works in nightlife, and is even pregnant with his child. I felt disgusted. How could he think it's fine to have a child with someone barely older than our son? Life should be about love, he said, sneering. Not with someone cold and dull like you, but with someone like Ashley, who's young, with fresh, beautiful skin. That's what makes spending money worthwhile. I realized that to him, love was something he could buy. So you're leaving me for a young girl who's after your money and doesn't mind having an affair with a married man, I replied, making him angry. It's not about money, he shouted, it's real love. Anyway, I need to marry Ashley as soon as possible to keep her happy, he added, so pack your things and get out. I was stunned, almost speechless. He only cared about himself and what he wanted. As I thought about it, though, the situation began to feel a little ridiculous. He hadn't used the word love with me in ages, and I could already guess how this would turn out. Eventually, he'd treat Ashley the same way he was treating me now, once the excitement wore off. Really, you're pathetic, Ethan sneered. I should have seen this before we got married. Looking back, I did all the housework and childcare on my own, while my husband never helped. All he did was criticize me, telling me what I was doing wrong, even though back then, it was just expected that I'd do it all. He never even showed appreciation, let alone love. And now, after all my hard work, he's tossing me aside for a younger woman. I couldn't believe he was thinking clearly, but he acted like my words were just jealousy. Well then, there's nothing more to say. We'll fill out the divorce papers on my next day off. Make sure you have everything ready. With that, he shut himself in his room. For the next few days, I couldn't sleep, and I cried in frustration. Outwardly, though, I pretended not to be bothered. Then, on his next day off, he actually brought the other woman to our house. Hello, Ethan's old wife. I'm here to help with the paperwork, she said, walking in confidently and sitting on the sofa. She introduced herself as Ashley. She had smooth skin and clearly knew she was attractive. Her heavy makeup and revealing clothes, like a dangerously low-cut top and a very short skirt, stood out, especially since I didn't even know where to look. But something in her behavior told me she didn't really love Ethan. I could tell she had a different goal in mind. I faced her calmly, already prepared for the divorce, but sensing something off about her attitude. Ashley, Did you start seeing Ethan knowing he's married? Calling me his old wife means you know where we each stand, right? She laughed confidently. I'm not stupid. Don't underestimate me. Old lady, you're the one getting dumped. I'm going to be Ethan's wife now. Simple as that. I smiled. Glad you said that so clearly. I recorded it, too. I held up the recorder, showing her I'd been recording our conversation. Her face changed, and she turned to Ethan, upset. Ethan, you said she wouldn't give us trouble. This isn't what we agreed on. Ethan tried to calm her down. Relax, Ashley, I've got it all planned. Don't worry. Their conversation was sickening to listen to. I couldn't hide my disgust. Then Ethan pulled out the divorce papers. Sign these, they include the conditions for alimony and splitting my pension. $30,000 to this old lady? That'll cut into my share, Ashley muttered without hesitation, clearly annoyed. It was obvious to me now, she was only after my husband's inheritance, which he was about to receive from his father. Well, Ashley, part of that money goes toward child support, my husband tried to explain, smiling at her like he thought her blunt attitude was cute. So it's like severance pay? Expensive, huh? She huffed. I could feel my anger boiling, but I kept calm and said, if you're willing to put these conditions in a notarized document, I'll accept them. Also, I'd like the payment in a lump sum. My husband, aware he was being recorded, quickly agreed. Are you happy now? I asked him, but Ashley, bored, just snapped. Hurry up with the papers. Old lady, be out by the end of the month, okay? I'm canceling my apartment lease. Once the document is ready, I'll sign the papers and leave, I replied calmly. Ashley grumbled, but finally left. Once the notarized document was finalized, my husband and I divorced. Then, as if she couldn't wait, Ashley showed up at the house to make sure I was leaving. Come on, hurry up and get out. I just submitted the marriage registration, now I'm Ethan's wife, and this lovely house is all mine, she said, grinning. I handed her the house keys, but before leaving, I asked, isn't Ethan about the same age as your parents? You called me old, but he's older than I am. Why did you choose him? Her answer was exactly what I'd expected. Ethan's a division manager at a top company, and this house is a stylish, newly renovated home near the station. I'll replace the furniture to my taste. He may be old and not handsome, but he promised to buy me whatever I want, so I'm set. She smirked as if mocking me. With a sigh, I said, I hope everything works out for you, and walked out of the home I'd lived in for so long. I moved to a dorm at a university, where I'd just been hired as a live-in dormitory manager, a rare role these days. Before that, I'd been working part-time at a company cafeteria. When I explained my situation and my wish to start a new life far away, my boss, who valued my work, helped me find an opportunity. A job had just opened up at a university dormitory due to an employee's retirement, and I gratefully accepted it. I was glad to have my nutritionist certification, which helped me get the position. The rent and utilities were really cheap, although I didn't have much free time to go out. It was a comfortable and enjoyable workplace. About 3 months into my new life, I got an unexpected phone call from my ex-husband. Mom isn't doing well. Can you help take care of her? He asked. I couldn't believe it. We're strangers now, I replied. Your new wife should be taking care of her. He tried to explain, saying, Ashley's pregnant, and my mom has dementia. She throws things, so it's dangerous. So, it's okay if she throws things at me? I thought. His request was absurd, and I flatly refused. Don't call me again. We have nothing to do with each other, I said firmly. Although my mother-in-law and I had been family for 20 years, we'd never been close. I'd just started living on my own, and I didn't have the time or resources to care for her. But my ex-husband didn't give up. Somehow, he found out where I lived and showed up with Ashley. If you won't help, at least return the money we paid you as consolation, he demanded. What a ridiculous request. I stood my ground. I don't owe you anything, and I'm not giving it back, I told him firmly. As I pushed him away, Ashley glared at me fiercely. You knew there was no inheritance and tricked us. We're drowning in debt, she screamed, throwing papers at me that scattered everywhere. I didn't trick anyone. You just assumed Ethan had money, I replied calmly, shrugging. When I handled my late father-in-law's estate, I found out he was deep in debt. Normally, we could have just refused the inheritance, but Ethan made a mistake. He canceled his father's phone plan and sold off some valuables before officially processing the inheritance. There's a law that says you can't refuse an inheritance if you've already used or sold any of the property. So now, the debt was all his, and Ashley's. Ethan just left all the inheritance paperwork to me, not listening to a thing I said. Ashley, you used that money to stay with him, right? I added. Ethan looked shocked. You should have told me, this is important, he argued. I shot back. I did try to tell you. You ignored me. Now you both need to take responsibility. Ashley looked pale and panicked. I didn't know about any of this, she protested. I never heard any of it. Really? I replied. If you hadn't cheated, you wouldn't have needed money for a mistress, and you could have just refused the inheritance. This situation is all because of your choices. Ethan groaned and backed away. I turned to Ashley. You knew he was married. You pursued him for his money, had his child, and even pushed me out. This is the life you wanted, isn't it? If I knew this would happen, I wouldn't have wanted this old man at all, she snapped. I continued. Do you remember the notarized documents from our divorce? I got alimony, part of his pension, and child support, but I can also claim alimony directly from you. Ashley. What? $230,000 isn't enough for you? You're so greedy, she yelled, furious. I shook my head. I would have let it go if you'd just left me alone. But you came to me, demanding I take care of his mother and return the alimony. I'm done putting up with this nonsense. I told Ashley I had a recording of our divorce negotiations and was serious about claiming alimony. She panicked and ran off without looking back. As I watched her leave, I turned to Ethan, who was still standing there, looking stunned. How can she run like that in her last trimester? I asked. Is she even really pregnant? And where's all that love now? At my questions, Ethan gasped, realizing his mistake. I was wrong. Please come back, Jessica, he begged, looking older and defeated, but I refused. No way, please leave. My ex-husband broke down, but he didn't deserve any sympathy after all he'd done. Later, just as I suspected, Ashley vanished, leaving only a divorce notice behind. It turned out her pregnancy was a lie, too. My ex-husband was left to face his debts and take care of his mother alone, and over time, he became worn down by the stress. As for me, I discovered a new purpose as a dorm mother for kids around my son's age. People even started saying I looked younger lately. From now on, I'm committed to living honestly, without arrogance or schemes. To everyone, I'd say, be careful when considering a divorce.
After my father's funeral, our family got together to talk about the inheritance. My father had been a respected major shareholder in a company. During the meeting, my brother-in-law Jason suddenly spoke up. My wife Emily, your eldest daughter, should get the stocks and a total of $5 million, he argued firmly. As my brother-in-law and sister seemed eager about getting a large sum of money, the lawyer, with a bit of surprise, calmly explained, Emily doesn't legally have the right to the inheritance. My name is John. I'm a 42-year-old salaried worker, living with my wonderful wife and 2 children. My father was well known as a major shareholder in a company and was still working at 78. I have an older sister named Emily, who has always caused our parents a lot of worry with her repeated troublesome behavior. Even though she is middle-aged, she hasn't settled into a stable career and lives a selfish life. I've always felt uneasy and frustrated with my sister's actions, so I keep my distance. When Emily turned 50, she suddenly brought home a young man and announced, I'm getting married. The man, Alex, was much younger than my sister. While he was attractive, he seemed irresponsible, which didn't impress me. Emily boldly demanded money from our father for her wedding, which she quickly spent. She shamelessly asked for more money, causing our father more stress. It's my inheritance anyway, so what's wrong with using it now? She said defiantly. I watched my sister's behavior coldly. Not long after her marriage, our father suddenly fell ill while playing golf and passed away quietly a few days later. Losing him so suddenly was a deep sorrow for me. His unexpected death shocked his many friends, and the phone kept ringing nonstop. Telling myself there was no time for tears, I took charge of the funeral arrangements for my grieving mother. As usual, my sister left home and refused to help with the funeral. Exhausted after the funeral, my mother and I barely had time to rest when the lawyer came to our house the next day to discuss the inheritance. We already knew that our father had left a will. Unaware of this, my sister Emily and her husband Jason, who seemed oddly confident, barged into the discussion and made a shocking statement. Jason, looking triumphant, said, "The stocks and the $5 million inheritance will go to my wife, your eldest daughter, so don't think about using it as you please," he boasted confidently. My mother and I were bewildered by this absurd statement, at a loss for words. Jason, looking smug, exclaimed, "All right, Emily, with this, we'll be rich too." His excitement was barely containable. Far from mourning my father's death, my brother-in-law's jubilant demeanor shocked the lawyer. Emily, looking dissatisfied, questioned, "What kind of reaction is that?" The lawyer, facing them seriously, clarified, "I'm sorry, Emily, but you have no legal right to the inheritance." This news left both my sister and brother-in-law stunned. Emily, visibly angry, raised her voice. "That can't be true. Emily is the eldest daughter, after all," Jason said, revealing his high hopes for the inheritance, a clear hint of greed in his eyes. "Were you not aware? Emily is not the biological daughter of the deceased." Upon hearing this, Emily's face changed dramatically, and she turned to our mother with a questioning gaze. "Mom?" At that moment, my mother looked conflicted, as if she couldn't find the right words to say. I had always known that Emily wasn't biologically related to our father, but it seemed she was completely unaware of this fact. Confused, Emily began to shake our mother's shoulders, pleading in a desperate voice, "Mom, what does this mean?" Unperturbed by the shaking, my mother calmly yet firmly replied, "Emily, you are the daughter of my previous husband." As she quietly disclosed the significant fact, Emily, who had always tormented me by saying, "Dad loves me the most," now wore a face of utter disbelief. Suddenly, Jason interjected, "But if there was an adoption, she would have rights to the inheritance, right?" "That's correct, isn't it, Emily?" he asked, seeking confirmation from my sister. "Yes, that should be the case," Emily replied. However, in front of Emily, our mother slowly shook her head. "No, Emily, we never went through an adoption," my mother stated quietly. At her words, both my sister and brother-in-law once again wore faces of shock. Emily, shaking with anger, cried out, "How could this be? I am the oldest daughter of this family, and Dad even said so." Emily yelled at me, filled with anger. Her voice shaking, she continued, "Why do you get to control all of our family's money?" Her words made me furious, and I quickly shot back, "Have you ever thought about how much you made Dad spend? Do you still have something to say?" I said angrily, "Shut up. I'm the daughter of this house. I have every right to the money." "Spending money on a daughter is what parents are supposed to do," she insisted. I was shocked and let out a deep sigh. Normally, spending money on a daughter isn't wrong. But the problem was how much my sister made Dad spend on her debts and other expenses. Then the lawyer, who had been quietly watching, finally spoke up. "How about we let Emily see the will too?" "A will? What are you talking about?" "I don't know anything about a will," Emily responded, confused. Emily's ignorance about the will was her own fault. Dad wanted to discuss the will with the whole family and had asked everyone to be there when it was written. But she ignored this and went out to do other things. When I mentioned this, Jason couldn't hide his anger and glared at Emily. "Why did you do that, Emily? It was important." "So what will you all do?" At this question, my sister and brother-in-law looked at each other and agreed to hear the will. The lawyer then read aloud Dad's will, which clearly named my mother and me as the only inheritors of the entire estate. The will also explained why Emily was not legally adopted. It seemed Dad had originally wanted to accept Emily as a formal family member, but the will detailed his disappointment in her mean actions towards me since childhood and her increasing wastefulness as she grew older. No way, Emily was shocked and speechless. Faced with the reality of having no inheritance rights, she seemed unable to recover from the shock. "What does this mean, Emily? Were you deceiving me, making me believe we'd become rich?" Jason demanded. My mother and sister were stunned, but I wasn't surprised. Jason's dishonest behavior regarding money had always been obvious. He might have married Emily just for her money. "Emily, come back here until you have money." "Wait, Jason, don't be so cruel. I believed we'd be rich together. I'm so disappointed in you," Emily pleaded. Jason roughly pushed past Emily and left the room. Left behind, Emily glared at us with a face full of anger. "Mom, why didn't you adopt me?" she demanded. My mother, struggling to find words, managed to say, "Well, that is why." "Why does Mom get the inheritance? I should have rights too. It's unfair because of Mom's lack of action. Don't you think it's terrible?" Emily cried. My mother quietly murmured, "Emily, it's unfair. Too cruel." Emily's cries, with her hair disheveled, were intense enough to scare anyone. But the lawyer remained calm, as if it were a normal day. "Why do you get everything? Why nothing for me?" Emily demanded. "Because I'm Dad's biological child," I said. As soon as I said that, Emily, in a fit of rage, reached out to hit me. "It would have been better if you never existed," she screamed. I thought that even if I hadn't been there, Dad would have made the same decision because of Emily's behavior. But before I could argue back, the lawyer quietly intervened. "Emily, please refrain from such actions. Otherwise, I will have to contact the police," he warned her gently. Emily, startled by the mention of the police, calmed down. With a history of minor crimes like shoplifting, she was sensitive to the mention of the authorities. My mother, holding back tears, tried to speak again, but Emily clicked her tongue in frustration and left the room. About 6 months later, the inheritance process was smoothly completed. Emily and Jason initially resisted strongly, but the lawyer's skillful handling left them little room to interfere. Eventually, my mother did give Emily a small amount of money, but it wasn't my place to comment on it. Frustratingly, Emily and Jason then disappeared without a trace. Their blatant greed left our relatives shocked and disappointed. One day, my wife suggested we take my mother and daughter out for a pleasant meal. Since losing Dad, my mother had been down, but spending time with her beloved granddaughter brightened her up. "Mom, why don't you come and live with us?" I proposed to my mother, but she hesitated. "Well, Emily might come by occasionally. Emily only comes here to beg for money. You shouldn't indulge her," I replied. My mother's hesitation was understandable. Despite her issues, Emily was her irreplaceable daughter. If we went to our family home, there was a chance Emily would cause trouble again. Understanding these concerns, I gave my mother some time to think as I drove her home. Surprisingly, there were lights on at the usually empty house. Thinking Emily might have returned, I parked the car cautiously in the garage. We got out of the car and started walking towards the entrance. Suddenly, a car rushed towards us. "Watch out," my daughter, who was leading the way, yelled instinctively. I threw myself to protect my wife, barely avoiding the car. "Ouch," I groaned in pain. Fortunately, the car only grazed me, but I was thrown against a flower bed. The car eventually crashed into the garage entrance and came to a stop. My wife, with a worried expression, asked, "Are you okay?" "Dad," my mother trembled at the entrance, unable to speak due to surprise and concern. The situation was chaotic. I was rushed to the hospital by ambulance and ended up staying overnight. It turned out Jason was the one who caused the accident. He told the police he mistook the brake for the accelerator, but I wasn't convinced. During this time, Emily visited the hospital with my mother. While my mother was tending to flowers, Emily looked at me and said, "You're surprisingly tough, aren't you?" she muttered, seemingly disappointed. I thought to myself, just as I suspected, and provocatively responded, "If I had died in the accident, Mom would have inherited everything." Disappointed at my words, Emily clearly looked uneasy. "I know what you were expecting," I continued as Emily averted her eyes, looking down. "But you see, Mom intends to renounce her inheritance, so your hopes won't come to fruition." As I said this, Emily stared back at me in astonishment. It seemed unbelievable to her that someone would willingly give up what they could receive. "I have a wife and kids, so Mom says the inheritance should go to them. That's what a parent should do," I explained. "But that's," Emily started to object, her words trailing off. "I've made a will early, following Dad's example. Unfortunately, the inheritance that I should have will no longer go to Mom." At these words, Emily shivered, unable to hide her agitation. Unable to conceal her anger, Emily raised her voice. "Give me a share. It's $5 million, isn't it?" When I said no firmly, Emily got really angry and grabbed my shirt. "You should give me half at least. I'm your real sister," she shouted. She kept yelling loudly about wanting half of the money we inherited, but I felt sorry for her. Being so greedy would have disappointed Dad. "Can't you see that?" I said calmly to her. Emily's face turned red quickly and she tried to grab my throat. Just then, our mom came back into the room and yelled, "Emily, what are you doing?" When she heard our mom, the nurses came in and took Emily away. Mom seemed to want to protect Emily, but Emily left, saying mean things to her. "What did I do wrong raising her?" Mom said sadly. Not long after that, we found out that Mom had gotten sick. We felt sad seeing her get weaker, So we started helping out more with things like dragging her places and doing chores. This seemed to make Emily even angrier. She might have found out from Mom or my wife when she asked for money. One day, Emily called me unexpectedly on my phone. "We'll take care of Mom from now on. You don't need to come anymore," she said. "What do you mean all of a sudden?" I asked. "I've already decided," she replied. I was worried about leaving Mom in Emily's care because Emily struggled with basic household tasks, let alone caring for someone who was sick. I quickly called Mom to understand what was going on. Surprisingly, Mom said Jason had experience taking care of people, and she felt okay for the time being. I felt relieved, but then Mom suddenly had to go to the hospital in an ambulance because of a mistake with her medicine dosage. We all rushed to the hospital and found Mom very weak. I asked my wife to stay with her and went back to our family home. When I got there, the house was a mess. Mom couldn't even cook her favorite meals anymore. The fridge was empty, and it seemed like Emily had fired the helper without telling anyone. I regretted expecting anything from Emily and felt angry. When I checked Mom's safe, a lot of money had been taken out of her bank account. Thankfully, the money from the inheritance was safe somewhere else. But the money Mom used for everyday things was almost all gone. I quickly gathered important documents like bank books, cards, and seals, and went back to the hospital to explain everything to Mom and figure out what to do next. "Emily has," Mom struggled to say. It seemed she didn't know about the money being taken out of her account, and she was shocked. When I mentioned the mistake with her medicine, Mom said Jason had prepared it, and her expression became even darker. "I think it's best if we don't let Emily back into the house," I told Mom. "John," Mom replied, looking confused. I explained my worries further. "I promised to take care of things, but the house is in such a mess." "Mom, you've lost a lot of weight. You must not have been eating well." Seeing her reaction, I gently suggested, "Mom, let's live together. Let's build a new house and stay there together." Mom started crying heavily at my words. But soon after, her condition got worse, and despite the doctor's efforts, she passed away. Heartbroken over what Emily did, I went back to the family home to get ready for Mom's funeral. I found out that all the valuable things were gone. It turned out Emily and her husband, who were having money problems, took them. Seeing the empty house, I felt shocked and angry. "We have to fix this, no matter what," I decided firmly. The day after Mom's funeral, I was supposed to meet Emily and the lawyer at the law office to talk about the inheritance. Emily, feeling superior, confidently said, "I have the right to Mom's inheritance, unfortunately for you." I couldn't help but laugh at her misunderstanding. She was making a big mistake. The lawyer opened the will, and as soon as we saw what was written, Emily's face turned pale with shock. "No. How could this happen?" Emily exclaimed. "The will clearly says you're not getting anything," the lawyer told Emily. Jason, furious, demanded, "What's that supposed to mean? She's her daughter. You can't fool us. Give us the inheritance now." He banged the table in anger. I calmly asked him, "Jason, did you do something to Mom?" "I didn't do anything," he replied dismissively. "Then why was her medication messed up?" I pressed, but Jason just brushed it off, saying, "That doesn't matter." "John, I can't believe I'm getting nothing from Mom's inheritance. What did you do?" "I can't pay my apartment rent now," Emily said. Her words shocked me. I realized Emily had assumed she'd get something, even though she didn't show up right after Mom died. Emily, desperate, asked the lawyer, "Is there really nothing for me?" The lawyer sighed deeply and said, "Yes, the will is clear." Then the lawyer explained the legal stuff about the mandatory share. It turned out that after taking away the money Emily had taken out and sold without permission, there wasn't much left in the inheritance. Actually, this was part of a plan I had talked about with the lawyer before. Emily was shocked and protested loudly, "There can't be so little." Mom and I had purposely not told Emily about this. In reality, most of Mom's stuff had been given to my daughters while she was alive, so there wasn't much left to inherit. But Emily didn't want to accept it and kept complaining. Like with Dad, I felt really angry with Emily, who only took from others without doing anything herself. It's so disrespectful to just take money when Mom thought you'd take care of her. Taking care of someone costs money, and you don't get that, I told her. Then show me what you spent on Mom. If it's really necessary, I'll pay for it, Emily said. When I said that, Emily got shaky and her face changed. There's no proof. Without receipts, we can't agree to those expenses, I told her. While Emily was silent, Jason attempted to use a gentle tone to sway things his way. John, think about it. Your sister really needs help right now. Wouldn't it be good to lend a hand? I'm sorry, but I can't agree to that, I said firmly. Jason was shocked by my direct refusal and stayed quiet for a bit. I didn't hold back my feelings and openly admitted, honestly, I've been treated badly by my sister for a long time. I almost feel satisfied now. But you're siblings, right? Can't you try to work together a bit? If the plan we had made earlier had worked, Emily would have gotten all the inheritance, Jason said. What plan? I asked. Jason went on. It's Emily's fault things didn't work out. I was supposed to get a new car, but now I only have enough for repairs. Emily panicked and tried to stop him, but it was too late. That sounds like fraud, I said, seeing where it was going. What? That's against the law. We got permission to record this meeting beforehand, the lawyer explained. Jason went pale, realizing his mistake. I said firmly, I'll be taking legal action about what you just said. That's ridiculous. There's no proof. Jason protested. Proof? What you said is proof enough, I replied. Emily cried out in agony, shaking Jason. You fool. What do we do now? This is all your fault. As a result, Jason faced legal consequences, and his past wrongdoings came to light, leading to his arrest. Although Emily seemed to be involved too, she struggled to pay her apartment rent. When she asked relatives for help, they all said no. Meanwhile, I kept working steadily, not letting the situation affect me, and looked forward to small joys like stock dividends.
In the midst of the swirling tension, those two simple words, "Get out," pierced through the air, leaving me utterly dumbfounded. The source of this command was none other than my eldest son's wife. The echoes of a similar expulsion I have faced when leaving my parents' home many years ago reverberated in my mind. A sudden surge of anger welled up within me at the thought of being driven out of yet another home. Resolute, I declared, "Well, I'll leave then," my voice trembling with a mix of indignation and sorrow. With determination, I began to gather my belongings, silently vowing that this would be the last straw in a long line of grievances. I swore to myself that I would never forgive my oldest son's wife for this affront. As I packed my things, the realization hit me that it was time to put my plan into action. Jessica, my daughter-in-law, had pushed me to this point, and I couldn't let her behavior go unaddressed. But before delving into the present, allow me to introduce myself. I am Sandra Clark, on the cusp of turning 61 this year. While technically retired, I consider myself fortunate to still be engaged in work, albeit not in the traditional sense. These days, I work mostly from the comfort of my home, occasionally dropping into the office for meetings. The modern work landscape has evolved, and remote work is now the norm. My oldest son, however, seems to have misconceptions about my current life. In his eyes, I'm no longer working and am merely residing in his home. I became a widow in my 40s and, for the most part, have led a financially secure life. The insurance payout from my late husband remains largely untouched, ensuring that my twilight years would be free from financial worries. While it might seem like I'm living a carefree life, I do have my concerns. Chief among them is my oldest son's wife, Jessica. She possesses a strong-willed personality and frequently finds herself at odds with me. This isn't a recent development. It began when she first came to announce their impending marriage. I can't forget the audacious act of showing up in a tracksuit, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. She claimed she wanted me to see her without any pretense, but I couldn't help but see it as a breach of common sense and decorum, to put it mildly. Her behavior often borders on the absurd, and her unwavering confidence and articulate arguments only complicate matters. I'd often wondered why my eldest son had chosen her as his life partner, and I later learned that it was Jessica who had approached him. Despite her eccentricities, there was no denying her beauty, and it seemed that my somewhat sheltered son was completely smitten with her. Even after their marriage, Jessica's behavior remained consistent. She wasn't one to put on airs, but also seemed to lack an understanding of social norms. As much as I wanted to oppose their marriage, I restrained myself, believing it was what my son truly desired. Unfortunately, the consequences of my decision were manifesting before my eyes. Surprisingly, my son was adamant about us all living together in our family home after the wedding. I had initially expected Jessica to oppose this arrangement, but to my surprise, she was in favor of it. It didn't take long for the reasons behind her preference to become clear. After we started living together, Jessica seemed to have completely abdicated her responsibilities when it came to household chores, leaving me to bear the entire burden. From cleaning to laundry and meal preparation, she entrusted all these tasks to me. What baffled me even more was that she was a full-time housewife who had willingly quit her job at the time of our marriage. While I didn't have to commute to work daily, I still had a remote job that demanded a substantial portion of my time, leaving me with even less free time than her. As I diligently faced my computer screen to fulfill my job responsibilities, Jessica would often make belittling comments, insinuating that I was merely playing around. At first, I brushed off her remarks with a laugh, deeming it too troublesome to engage in an argument every time. However, as time passed, it became increasingly irksome to endure her constant undermining. One day, unable to bear the imbalance in our household duties any longer, I decided to approach Jessica with a simple request. Asking if she could lend a hand with the cleaning, considering the ample free time she appeared to have. At that moment, she was idly engrossed in a TV drama, and her reaction was far from positive. With a deeply disgusted expression, she sighed dramatically and retorted, "The reason I don't involve myself in housework is for your sake, dear. Why can't you understand? It's disheartening that you can't appreciate my thoughtfulness." In a rather peculiar turn of logic, she justified her refusal to contribute to household chores by claiming that doing so would deprive me of my sole job. According to her, this would lead to a sedentary lifestyle for me, which she argued was unhealthy. Moreover, she expressed concerns about the potential development of dementia due to a lack of mental stimulation. In other words, Jessica believed that allowing me to handle all the housework was somehow in my best interest. Her reasoning bordered on the absurd, and I couldn't help but shake my head in disbelief. In an attempt to lighten the situation, I reminded her, "We decided to live together so that you can make sure I don't slack off, dear." Her response, delivered with a half smile, left me utterly speechless and confounded. It was in that moment that I began to deeply regret our decision to cohabitate. Every day felt like an ordeal, as I found myself laboring over household chores under Jessica's watchful eye. Frustrated and feeling like I was at my breaking point, I decided to confide in my eldest son. My intention was not to complain about Jessica, but to find a solution to my predicament. I explained to him the difficulties of living in our current house, which was old and riddled with level differences. My age and physical condition had taken a toll, resulting in a back injury the previous year. These challenges made daily life increasingly arduous for me. Following our conversation, I made the decision to move into an apartment. It felt like Jessica had driven me to this choice, though I had no regrets about leaving. The new apartment I secured was a rental, and while I initially thought it might be too spacious for me to live alone, I ensured that it had enough room for my grandchildren to stay over in the future. I even had the interior customized to my taste, and at last, my own personal castle was complete. However, my joy was short-lived as Jessica began coming over to the new apartment every day, staying until late into the evening. She lounged on the living room couch, looking around and commenting, "The new apartment is really nice, isn't it, Mother? It might be too big for just you. Why don't you come back to your old home and take care of the house chores? It's for your health and longevity, you know." Jessica's behavior had become unbelievably frustrating. She insisted that I return to our old house to take care of the chores during the day, and her self-centeredness was enough to make anyone dizzy. I had already moved out of that house, and it was time for her to step up as the wife and handle the household responsibilities. After all, I was the one taking care of all the house chores in my new place, and my annual checkups always came back with good results. There was really nothing for Jessica to worry about. However, when I confronted Jessica about this, she simply turned her head away, as if pretending not to hear my words. It was her usual strategy to ignore anything that was inconvenient for her. Yet, even after this confrontation, Jessica continued to visit my apartment regularly. Just the other day, she casually mentioned that going back to the old house was too much of a hassle, and ended up staying the night. My parents' home and my apartment were conveniently located just a 15-minute walk apart. And it was my eldest son who had suggested I live near my parents' home. He was concerned about me and thought it would be better for me to be closer to them. While his concern touched me, it also made me a little sad to leave the house where I had spent so many years. One day, when I had been out on a rare business-related outing and returned in the evening, I was in for a surprise. To my disbelief, Jessica had let herself into my apartment using the spare key I had given to my son without telling me. "Oh, welcome back," she said, lying on the floor in front of the TV, not even bothering to get up. I was taken aback and felt uncomfortable knowing that she had been in my apartment while I was away. I told her sternly, "Jessica, that spare key is meant to be used in emergencies, not for you to let yourself in when I'm not home." It was the first time I had firmly asserted myself with her. She seemed surprised because I was usually quick to forget my anger, but this time I held my ground. Her response was less than pleasant. "You really are a stingy mother-in-law," she yelled at me. "I can't stand that about you, and I can't stand anything about you, not even this apartment. We're a family, so you should leave." She tried to usher me out the front door. It became clear that Jessica couldn't stand the thought of me living in this apartment. She was upset that her family was living in the old house while I occupied this place. According to her, it was unfair that the rent for this apartment was being paid by my son James. She believed that it wouldn't be strange for us as his family to live here. In her mind, it was a matter of living within our means. Jessica's perspective helped me understand why she was constantly showing up at my apartment. She believed that this apartment should have been a place for her family to live, and she was not shy about expressing her displeasure. In the end, I decided to agree with her demands. "All right, I will leave," I retorted, staring her down. I promised to move my belongings out within 3 days. Jessica, still skeptical, demanded that I call the moving company right there in front of her. I didn't waste a moment and immediately called a moving service from my smartphone, scheduling them to come in 2 days. As Jessica left satisfied with the resolution, I watched her retreating figure and began formulating a plan for my new life in a senior-specific apartment. It was time for a fresh start and a peaceful living environment. After much contemplation, I made the decision to embark on a 2-week trial of a significant change in my life. It involved the rather unsettling task of handing over both the keys to my cherished apartment and the accompanying lease documents to Jessica, all in the hopes of initiating a contractual alteration through the mediation of our trusty real estate agent, who would ultimately convey our request to the landlord. Fortunately, my history with the landlord spanned many years, and this long-standing relationship proved to be the beacon of flexibility and understanding I had been hoping for during this tumultuous period. Their willingness to accommodate our requested changes in such a congenial manner was, to say the least, an immense relief to me. However, my eldest son, whose emotions were running high and his patience dwindling, was not as pleased with this development. In fact, he was furious with Jessica for what he perceived as her kicking me out of our beloved apartment. The strain in their relationship had reached a point where he was seriously contemplating divorce. Oddly enough, though Jessica appeared unperturbed by his inner turmoil, displaying a surprising level of indifference. On the contrary, she seemed to have embraced the idea of living alone in our apartment and boldly declared her desire for us to live separately. I couldn't help but marvel at her audacity in the face of such a complex and emotional situation. However, what Jessica did not know was that in a mere 5 days, she would come face to face with the truth, and it would change everything. As I continued with my remote work, my phone began to ring incessantly. The caller ID displayed Jessica's name, and I had been eagerly anticipating this moment. I had a recorder ready and waiting to document the impending conversation. Calmly, I pressed the record button and answered the call. "Excuse me, Mother," Jessica's voice rang out. "What's the deal with the rent for this apartment? Why do I have to pay it? This isn't right." Jessica's words triggered a relentless tirade, and it was evident that she was thoroughly flustered. I decided to maintain my composure and respond deliberately. "Oh, but Jessica, aren't you the current leaseholder? It's only right that you should pay. Is there a problem?" My tone was calculated, designed to provoke and annoy Jessica further. To my amusement, the flustered Jessica seemed to become even more agitated. "But didn't James used to pay the rent here? We're not even divorced yet, so shouldn't James pay it?" she retorted. At this point, it was clear that Jessica was desperately trying to shift the financial responsibility onto my eldest son's shoulders. In reality, there was never a time when my son had contributed to the rent. In fact, I had been discreetly providing him with financial support all along. Even after retiring from my job, I continued to work as a consultant for the same company and earned a substantial salary. Additionally, I had taken on advisory roles in the industry, offering my expertise and earning a respectable income based on my well-established reputation. It was safe to say that my earnings far surpassed those of my eldest son. While I had been keeping my financial support a well-guarded secret, it was time for the truth to come to light. "So, Jessica, it's a misunderstanding on your part," I calmly explained. "Originally, I was the one paying the rent for that place. I didn't make James pay a dime." The revelation left Jessica in a state of shock, her grand plans of independent living in our new apartment crumbling before her eyes. She managed to utter a few more words before abruptly ending the call. Immediately, I contacted my eldest son and allowed him to listen to the recorded conversation. His exhaustion from repaying Jessica's mounting debts was palpable, and I understood the burden he was carrying. As a parent, it was only natural for me to extend a helping hand, even if others deemed me too lenient. My son responded softly, "I'll divorce her. I'm tired too." And with that admission, our journey toward addressing this challenging chapter in our lives began in earnest. Guided by a newfound sense of resolve and unity, I sat down with my son, sharing my intricate plan and providing him with a set of detailed instructions. It was crucial that he followed these steps to the letter, and I needed him to understand the gravity of the situation. My first request was for him to take a leave of absence from work, spanning approximately 3 days starting from today. This would be the initial phase of our carefully orchestrated strategy. With a hushed tone and a stern look, I directed him to execute the most crucial aspect of the plan: the discreet removal of his essential belongings from the house. It was imperative that he accomplish this without alerting Jessica, his soon-to-be ex-wife, to our intentions. I emphasized the importance of keeping this operation under the radar, ensuring that no large moving trucks or suspicious activities would draw her attention, potentially causing complications. My instructions also included a specific timeline. I advised my son to gradually move his possessions during the cover of nightfall. The destination for these crucial items was carefully chosen, a single-family home hidden from Jessica's knowledge. I had scoured the area extensively to find this discreet location, which would serve as his final dwelling. Our plan was designed to unfold discreetly, shrouded in secrecy, with each step executed meticulously to minimize any potential hiccups or interruptions. 3 days later, we would put our strategy to the test. Then, as anticipated, the phone rang once more, and the caller ID displayed Jessica's name. This time, her voice was laden with an even greater sense of urgency and agitation. Curiously, I greeted her, maintaining an intentionally relaxed and composed tone. But it was clear that Jessica was on the verge of panic. Her distress was palpable, and her words tumbled out in a rush. "Mother, our house is up for sale, and I received a call from my parents. They informed me that my belongings have arrived at their house. What does this mean?" It became apparent that my eldest son had followed through with my instructions precisely. He had relocated Jessica's possessions to her parents' house and listed the house they once shared for sale, leaving it empty. The landlord had promptly issued an ultimatum, stating that if the rent remained unpaid, Jessica would need to vacate the premises. The situation had escalated quickly, and Jessica was now in a state of near hysteria. With a sense of finality in my voice, I responded, "Jessica, there are a few things I want to correct." The time had come to address all the pent-up frustration and grievances that had accumulated over time. "Firstly, I am no longer your mother-in-law," I asserted firmly. "Yesterday, James filed for divorce. As you signed the papers, didn't you?" The divorce had been a long time coming, primarily because of Jessica's habit of using divorce as a weapon to manipulate my eldest son. I explained that my son had signed the divorce papers and officially submitted them to the city office. It was a bold step given his deep love for Jessica when they initially married. However, he had come to realize that her constant threat of divorce was an unhealthy pattern, one that had left him with no alternative. "The divorce papers have been formally accepted," I added, emphasizing the irrevocable nature of the situation. "You always said to James that you could divorce any time. Aren't you satisfied now that things have gone your way?" My voice was calm, but the tension hung in the air. On the other end of the line, Jessica seemed to be holding her breath, searching for words to respond. Frustration must have been coursing through her veins as she was unable to articulate a retort. Moreover, I couldn't help but express genuine concern for her post-divorce prospects. I pointed out the practical challenges she would face, including her financial situation and the costs associated with relocation. "How did you even manage to pay this amount?" I inquired, genuinely surprised. Jessica's frustration was no longer concealed. It erupted into a tirade of anger and curses directed at me. In that moment, it was clear that our carefully orchestrated plan had unfolded precisely as intended, though the repercussions were unfolding in ways that no one could have predicted. She spoke of her union with my son in a manner that was nothing short of confounding. According to her, the marriage was a consequence of her late husband's inheritance, which she asserted was now under her stewardship. In a tone that pierced the air, she vehemently declared her inability to so much as budge a single penny from this newfound wealth. It was as if she had been bound by some invisible financial straitjacket. The anguished cry that followed was a stark contrast to her earlier tone. Her grievances flowed freely as she lamented the unfortunate turn of events. It was evident that her matrimonial ties had been forged under the weight of insurmountable debts. I chose not to intervene, allowing my son to eavesdrop on this exchange, understanding that it might serve as valuable evidence in case of a future divorce. As Jessica's tirade continued, I patiently waited for it to run its course, a task that demanded significant endurance. For approximately a quarter of an hour, she ranted unabated, her words like a storm of frustration and discontent. Then something shifted. The tone of her voice softened, and the anger that had once consumed her gave way to desperate pleas. She confided in me, revealing her disconnection from her own family, who had disowned her due to her profligate spending and borrowing habits. Tearfully, she begged for assistance, her voice quivering with vulnerability. As I listened, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy for her, though I remained steadfast in my resolve to view her predicament as a consequence of her actions. Apologies and regrets, it seemed, held little sway over our relationship now. We were, after all, strangers, and there was little more to be said. With a curt farewell, I ended the conversation, finally exhaling a sigh of relief. However, the drama did not end there. My eldest son later informed me that Jessica had caused a scene at his workplace, leading to the involvement of law enforcement. Upon returning home, he discovered that she had been forcibly locked out of their shared apartment, with the landlord having changed the locks during her absence. It appeared that she had been attempting to reach us, but we had preemptively disconnected our phones and changed our numbers. Jessica's desperation must have been palpable when she found herself unable to communicate with us. She was left with no choice but to turn to her estranged family for help. However, her return home was met with a cold reception, as her family had left her belongings, which I had sent to them, exposed to the elements in the backyard. Adding insult to injury, the unpaid rent for her apartment had been billed to her parents, further stoking their anger. Rumors began to circulate that Jessica had found refuge in an apartment provided by an organization that supported the homeless. The stark change in her circumstances became evident when I crossed paths with her on the street. Her once vibrant hair had turned a ghostly white, and her skin had lost its luster, a testament to the stress she had endured. Observing her transformation underscored how profoundly living conditions could impact a person's well-being. It was a stark reminder of the consequences of one's choices. As for me, I had settled into a new life in a house purchased with my late husband's inheritance. It was a duplex, ensuring that my son could remarry should he choose to do so. We shared meals, but otherwise, he managed his affairs independently. The money for the sale of my parents' home was carefully preserved for future needs, earmarked for my son and his prospective wife, and of course, any future grandchildren. In the tranquility of my new abode, I nurtured an English garden, a long-held dream. On days when work did not demand my attention, I would tend to the yew trees and herbs, finding solace and purpose in their growth. This new life, brimming with hope, had become my daily routine, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the possibility of renewal.
I found out I have a serious sickness called leukemia, and the doctors say I need to stay in the hospital for a long time to get better. But when I told my family, they turned their backs on me, saying I deserved it. That's when it hit me. They don't really care about me. When I said I wanted to stop being part of their lives, they were happy about it, but they haven't realized yet how much they rely on me. My name is Sally, and I'm a stay-at-home mom in my 40s. My husband Michael and I have been married for almost 50 years. We have a daughter named Mia who just started middle school. Right now, I live with Michael, Mia, and my mother-in-law. Michael's mom raised him by herself after her divorce when he was young. Maybe she spoiled him too much because he's pretty selfish. Living with my mother-in-law made me see a side of my husband I hadn't noticed before we got married. When my husband found out I was going to have a baby, he was really happy. He couldn't believe it at first, but then he thanked me and said we would face any challenges together. I promised to do my best. But that joy didn't last long. When we found out we were having a girl during a checkup, my mother-in-law said something really hurtful to me. She said, "You never cook meat, do you?" I tried to explain that I cook a balanced diet, but she wouldn't listen. She even said that maybe the reason the baby was a girl was because I didn't eat meat. I was shocked and hurt. She kept saying we only needed boys and that having a granddaughter was the worst thing. She even called me useless. I tried to tell myself that as long as the baby was healthy, it shouldn't matter if it was a boy or a girl. But as time went on, my hopes were crushed. My husband started acting distant too, maybe because he was listening to my mother-in-law. He began treating me differently, and it hurt. "Michael, do you want to go shopping for baby stuff when you're off next?" "Do I have to? It's our baby, right?" "I want us to pick things out together." "Fine, but let's stick to the basics. Babies cost a lot, and we need to save." "Then buy what you want with your own money." I had minimal income during maternity leave. I have to save for our child's future and cover clinic bills and baby expenses. I had to go along with what Michael and my mother-in-law said and only get the necessary baby stuff. I worried they wouldn't love our daughter when she arrived. But after Mia was born, Michael and my mother-in-law adored her. They loved her even more than I expected, so I stopped worrying. I planned to focus on parenting for a while. But when Mia turned 2, Michael told me to go back to work. I thought it would be okay since my mother-in-law loved Mia too. But when I returned to work, both my mother-in-law and Michael showered even more love on Mia. Michael started spoiling her, just like my mother-in-law had spoiled him. I tried to teach Mia right from wrong with love, but it seemed she didn't see it that way. Before I knew it, Mia didn't like me and preferred to be with my husband and mother-in-law. "Hey Mia, it's time for kindergarten. Let's go together." "I don't want to go with mommy. I want grandma." "Mia, mommy has to work too. Let's go to kindergarten together, okay?" "I hate mommy. I love daddy and grandma." "Mia, please don't say that." "No, mommy, just go away." Mia's words were really hurting my feelings. My mental health was suffering because of it. But my husband and mother-in-law didn't try to stop her. Instead, they looked at me like I deserved it. These tough times continued for about 10 years. Even in middle school, Mia hasn't changed. She avoids me and sticks to my husband and mother-in-law. And because of that, she's become uncontrollable. She screams and breaks things when she doesn't get her way. When I try to discipline her, she yells back at me. "Mia, can we talk? Did you take money from my wallet?" "Yeah. So what? You're my mom. You can give me money, right? Taking without asking is wrong. Please give it back." "No way. It's your fault for not getting me the Gucci wallet. I want it for my birthday. You're only in middle school. You don't need expensive things yet. I can get them when you're older." "I want it now. Why don't you understand, you old hack?" "Mia, don't talk like that. You're so annoying, Grandma. Mom is being mean to me." When I scold her, Mia turns to my mother-in-law for help. And my mother-in-law sides with her, blaming me too. "What's wrong, Mia? Did Mom upset you again?" "Listen, Grandma, she won't get me the Gucci wallet for my birthday, and she won't give me money either. Can you believe it? That's not fair. Your mom is being stingy. Grandma will get you the wallet next time, okay?" "Yay, thank you, Grandma." "You're welcome." "I love you, Grandma." Mia happily hugged my mother-in-law. Branded stuff is too much for her age, I thought. I disagreed with my mother-in-law. "Wait, Mom, Mia is still in middle school. Shouldn't we hold off on buying her expensive things?" I suggested. "But maybe not yet. You're so stingy." "I feel sorry for Mia having you as her mom," my mother-in-law snapped back. Every day, my mother-in-law spoiled Mia, buying her whatever she wanted. My husband did the same, filling our house with expensive stuff Mia barely used. Besides Mia's issues, there was another problem in our house. My mother-in-law's spending. I noticed she kept buying strange rings and bracelets. When I asked, she said a friend recommended them, but I suspected it was an MLM scheme. I wondered where she got the money since she was always buying things for Mia. Turns out, she was borrowing from banks. When I confronted her, she brushed it off, saying it wasn't my concern. I grew to hate dealing with family problems, so I threw myself into work, often working late. My husband and mother-in-law criticized me, but I didn't care. I just didn't want to be home. Then one day, I collapsed at work. Tests revealed I had leukemia, likely brought on by stress. I needed long-term treatment, so I was hospitalized. I called my mother-in-law from the hospital. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I collapsed at work. I've been diagnosed with leukemia, and I need to stay in the hospital." "You have leukemia?" I hoped she'd be at least a little concerned about my illness. But that hope quickly faded. "It's a good thing you finally got seriously sick." I was shocked by my mother-in-law's response. "What? What are you saying?" I asked. "I've been annoyed with you every day. This serves you right," she said callously. "That's a horrible thing to say. Hold on, let me talk to Mia." I asked to speak to Mia and my mother-in-law handed her the phone. "What?" Mia's response was something I never expected. "Mom, are you sick?" she asked. "I'm sorry, Mia. I have to stay in the hospital for a while," I explained. Mia's reply crushed me even more. "I'm actually glad. It's better without you bothering us. You're always mean to me. That's why you got sick. You deserve it." "Are you serious right now?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. That's incredibly cruel. Everyone would be happier if I stayed sick. "I have to tell Dad about this," I said to Mia before she hung up the phone. In that moment, I felt like giving up on my family. I had reached my breaking point. I decided I would be the one to cut ties with them. Mia was my daughter, but I endured so much pain to bring her into this world. I had hoped to raise her to be a good person. but her behavior was a combination of her innate personality and how my husband and mother-in-law raised her. Some might find it unthinkable for a parent to walk away from their child, but despite our blood connection, I couldn't forgive their behavior any longer. I called my parents and asked them to bring clothes because neither my husband, mother-in-law, nor Mia had visited me during my hospital stay. Months later, after successful treatment and full recovery, instead of returning to the house I shared with my husband, I returned to my parents' house and sought advice from a lawyer about getting a divorce. My mother-in-law and Mia agreed right away. Michael was hesitant at first, concerned about public perception, but eventually agreed under pressure from my mother-in-law and Mia. Since he cooperated, I was able to get a divorce and claim compensation. About 7 years passed. I moved out of my parents' house and lived near my workplace, healthy and energetic. Then, out of nowhere, I got a call from Michael. His voice sounded exhausted, and he quickly jumped into his problem. "Hello, Sally, can you come back?" "What? Why all of a sudden? Things are tough for me right now." "What do you mean?" "My mother, she's in a huge amount of debt." Michael had just found out about my mother-in-law's debt and reached out to me for help. The debt, which had been ignored for so long, had grown to a significant sum, and my mother-in-law could no longer keep it hidden from Michael. To my ex-husband's anxious plea, I replied calmly, "You're only noticing now. She's been in debt since I was there, from way back. It seems she got caught up in an M&M scheme. All the money she spent on spoiling Mia was borrowed from banks. I can't believe it. I had no clue. I tried to warn your mother several times, and I even tried talking to you about it. But every time, you just brushed it off. But not telling me about the debt is terrible, isn't it? If I had known earlier..." "Don't say that now. After all, I was in the hospital, and none of you even visited me once, remember? I'm sorry for that. Just help me out this once." "What are you talking about?" I snapped, losing my patience. My emotions boiled over, and I found myself shouting at Michael. "Do you think you can just apologize and everything will be okay? When I was sick and needed help, you abandoned me. I regret ever marrying you." My anger subsided, replaced by a sense of release. I had finally let out everything I'd been holding in. "You should end up in debt like your mother and suffer for once. Please, calm down. I'll apologize." "Shut up. It's disgusting to start relying on your divorced ex-wife now." In the background, I could hear Mia's voice. Then she took over the phone, sounding sad. "Mom, Grandma's in trouble because of her debts. Please help us." "It's not my problem. Don't ask me for help." Mia didn't give up, despite my quiet refusal. "Dad's struggling to repay Grandma's debts. I might not be able to afford college tuition and might have to drop out. Is that okay?" "So, Mom, why are you acting like this is someone else's problem? Your own daughter is in trouble." "Daughter? Who?" Mia's words made me chuckle. Just as she faced trouble, she emphasized she was my daughter, even though she'd never called herself that before. "What's so funny?" Michael asked. "I was just thinking about how you suddenly claim to be my daughter when you're in trouble, after calling me names all this time. That's not fair. I'm your biological daughter who's in trouble, But I don't have a daughter." "What?" "No, Mom. I made that decision 7 years ago when I was hospitalized. I don't need a family like you anymore. We're divorced, so we're just strangers now, okay?" "Mom, please don't say that." "Stop. Don't call me Mom because I'm not your mother. You should live happily with your father and grandmother who's in debt. Don't ever contact me again. You're just a burden in my life." With that, I ended the call and blocked their numbers to ensure they couldn't reach me again. After that, I heard that my ex-husband and mother-in-law were working tirelessly to repay their debts. They sold everything they owned, but it wasn't enough. They were struggling to make ends meet and even struggled to eat properly. My daughter couldn't afford her tuition and had to drop out of college. The expensive items she had were sold to pay off debts, leaving her with nothing. It seems even she is working to repay her grandmother's debts. It's heartbreaking to see my daughter facing such hardships compared to her peers. They really are foolish and helpless. They brought this upon themselves. As for me, I've purchased an apartment close to my workplace. I intend to invite my parents and live peacefully as a family of 3. From now on, I want to cherish each day with my true family and live happily.
No way, that's impossible. We're living together. You just need to sign the divorce papers. Good luck with your poor life. I stood there in a daze, holding the phone after the call was abruptly cut off. The lawyer couldn't help but burst into laughter. Jessica looked at the lawyer with a puzzled expression. The lawyer was wiping tears with a handkerchief. The CEO is actually Linda. My name is Linda. I've been married to my husband Mike for 2 years. We don't have children. We both work and are so busy that we often work on weekends. We hardly have time for long conversations, leading to a life of passing each other by. Therefore, we try to match our schedules and go on overseas trips during our long breaks. It's only once a year, but we both look forward to it. When we got married, we decided to buy an upper-floor condo in a Bay Area tower. It was a stretch, but we did it considering the future value of the asset. Thanks to that, we're satisfied with our current life. I have a close friend from high school, Jessica. We sometimes go out for lunch together. Jessica, being beautiful, has high standards for men. She's not married yet but has a strong desire to do so. She's always looking for well-educated, high-income men on dating apps. Especially, she won't compromise on income. One day, I was enjoying lunch with Jessica at a cafe near a park. We were together in high school and university, even in the same classes. That's why we've consulted each other about various things. As a result, we know quite a bit about each other's dating histories and types. During our student days, we shared both fun and sad times. Those are good memories. Since I married Mike 2 years ago, we've both become busy, and the time we can meet has decreased. Now we meet only a few times a year, if that. Hey, can I come visit your condo next time? Jessica suddenly asked me. Jessica had never been to my place before. Then on the weekend, Jessica came over to my place. I could sense her amazement even through the intercom at the entrance. Jessica kept saying, "This is amazing." The moment I opened the front door, Jessica looked impressed. "Wow, this place is like a mansion, and that elevator ride up was so long." I chose a spacious upper-floor condo because it was a once-in-a-lifetime purchase without compromising. It's even more spacious than a house. It's beautiful, really incredible. Jessica looked around the house, turning her head in every direction. Great location and an upper floor in a high-rise like this must have cost a pretty fortune. Jessica asked with a sly smile. Yeah, it's what you'd call a $1 million condominium. It's got great security too. Look here. Jessica cut me off, reacting only to the term $1 million condominium. Right? It must be over $1 million. Your husband must be making a lot, she said, eyes wide with astonishment. That was so like Jessica. She's always had high standards for men, especially regarding their income. Mike's salary is quite high for his age, I guess, I said vaguely. I felt it was tacky to be too explicit. Huh. She had a look that seemed to have some ulterior motive. Jessica said, "Can I use your bathroom?" and left the living room. I told Jessica where the bathroom was and then started preparing tea in the kitchen. Concerned about Jessica, who was taking a while to return, I was about to head to the bathroom when Jessica came back. Just replying to an email. Jessica doesn't usually make excuses like that. I felt a slight sense of unease while enjoying the cookies Jessica brought as a gift and having tea. She asked, "Can I stay till evening?" She apparently wanted to greet Mike. Indeed, it had been since our wedding that Jessica last saw Mike. It's not unnatural for her to want to see him. I decided to check with Mike just in case. Mike happily agreed. I might finish work early, he replied in an email. I assured Jessica that it was okay, and then I began preparing dinner. Jessica was initially engrossed in her smartphone, but eventually stood up and headed to the bathroom again. Unaware of the prolonged absence while cooking, I noticed when Jessica returned, she was wearing a necklace that seemed oddly familiar. It was mine. Staring at the necklace, Jessica flashed an embarrassed smile. How do I look? Does it suit me? She posed like a model. Stunned, I observed as Jessica started laughing, saying, "Oh, come on. I'm just kidding. I just found it and thought it was cute. It must have been super expensive, right? A premium piece for sure. She rambled like a child trying to justify her actions, labeling it a gift for Mike. Wow, he must be really wealthy to afford something like this. Jessica sighed. However, the necklace was stored in the closet in the bedroom. Jessica must have pretended to go to the bathroom and instead went to the bedroom, peeking into the closet. That's what it seemed like. I couldn't believe her actions, but I didn't want to come off as petty, so I emphasized that it was a precious item. Taking advantage of my lack of reprimand, Jessica made an outrageous request. Can I borrow this necklace for a while? I've got a date with a doctor I met on a dating app, and I want to wear it for that, please, she pleaded, joining her hands together as if praying. Reluctantly, I decided to lend it to her, emphasizing the need for careful handling, as it was a gift for Mike. As soon as Jessica knew she could borrow it, she smiled and began caressing the necklace. Of course, I understand, she seemed to pay no mind to my words. When I finished the meal prep, I pretended to go to the bathroom to check the bedroom. Sure enough, the closet in the bedroom and the chest beside the bed weren't fully closed. Jessica must have opened every drawer and door she could find. There were fingerprints on the jewelry, watches, and precious metals. Jessica might have touched things, but probably didn't intend to borrow them. The shoes seemed to have been forced on, and the heels were misshapen. This was clearly going too far. Returning to the living room, I confronted Jessica. You touched various things in the bedroom, didn't you? The shoes were misshaped, and there were fingerprints on the watch. Rather than appearing remorseful, Jessica puffed out her cheeks a bit. Please don't do that again, she said. Jessica returned to her normal expression and apologized, saying sorry. Not wanting to dwell on this and risk straining our friendship, I decided to just lightly laugh it off. That's when Mike came home, holding a box of cake. Mike and Jessica saw each other for the first time since our wedding. It was awkward at first, but they gradually warmed up to each other, making for a lively dinner. By the time we ate the cake Mike brought, they were chatting like good friends. While I was clearing the dishes and washing up, they were laughing together. My boss is terrible, right? I envy Mike's subordinates. Mike was grinning, eyes crinkling with laughter. That's not true. I was a bit bothered by Jessica casually touching Mike. But at the time, I thought it was better than them being distant. After all, Mike wasn't the type of man Jessica usually goes out with. About a month after Jessica's visit, Mike's behavior started to change. He spent more time on his smartphone, which he usually didn't do much. He often seemed distracted when I talked to him and asked me to repeat myself. He always carried the phone with him, even taking it to the bathroom. It was an obvious change, and it seemed I had become a cheated-on wife. Contemplating checking Mike's phone, I hesitated to even touch it. Conversations between Mike and me at home became increasingly rare, and he started working on weekends much more. Mike was hardly ever at home on weekends, and while we barely saw each other on weekdays originally, now not seeing each other on weekends too felt like living separately within the same house. Moreover, we started sleeping in separate bedrooms under the pretext of his tiredness. Vaguely considering divorce or separation, I stumbled upon divorce papers on the living room table one day. Upon closer inspection, Mike had already signed them. Though I had suspected it, actually seeing it still shook me. With trembling hands, I called Mike, questioning him about the unexpected discovery. I just got home and saw it on the table. What does this mean exactly? I inquired, hoping for clarification. Mike's response struck me hard. It's what it looks like. I want a divorce, he declared, leaving me stunned. Pressing him for a proper reason, Mike dropped the bombshell. I've fallen in love with someone else. It's not an affair. I'm serious. With disbelief, I heard a familiar female voice on the phone, Jessica. It was what I had suspected. I'm dating Mike, and I even want to marry him, Jessica admitted nonchalantly. Hearing the confirmation made my heart race and brought on a cold sweat. Jessica's crude way of talking hinted at a side of her I hadn't seen before. Mike echoed, "There's nothing left to talk about. Can you just sign the divorce papers and send them off? I want to talk things over, so please tell Mike to come home." Stunned by the abrupt ending of the phone call, I couldn't move for a while. Sleepless nights persisted as Mike didn't come home, and I couldn't bring myself to touch the divorce papers. Jessica continued to torment me by sending multiple photos of her and Mike together, flaunting their relationship. My mental health deteriorated, and my complexion worsened. People around me became worried, urging me to seek medical help. Reluctantly, I ended up in treatment, managing to regain some peace with medication. An unbelievable incident unfolded upon my return from the hospital. Something felt off inside the room, and upon checking the bedroom, I discovered that bags and jewelry were missing. The count of jewelry watches in the chest was off too. There was only one person who could do this: Jessica. Questions swirled in my mind. Why would she do something like this? What had I ever done to her? My insomnia relapsed, and sleepless nights continued, leaving me staggering through my days. During counseling at the hospital, when I mentioned the theft at home, I was strongly advised to consult a lawyer. I promptly contacted the company's lawyer and set up an appointment, stating my clear intention: I'll get a divorce. I want those two to face proper consequences. I responded immediately, surprising even myself. Just a little while ago, I was pondering what to do, and I couldn't believe how easily those words came out of my mouth. Perhaps I really wanted to punish them after being tormented so one-sidedly. It was just about getting back at them. Now, a week later, I received a message from Jessica. I had sent her a certified letter. "Hey, what are you thinking, sending a certified letter to my workplace?" Jessica sounded pretty angry, her voice filled with rage. "You must have expected at least this much. Anyway, I'm leaving everything to my lawyer now." I hung up the phone. Jessica called several times after that, but I ignored all of them. Then Mike called. I had sent a certified letter to his parents' house. Apparently, his affair being exposed at home caused a huge uproar. I wanted to burst out laughing at his self-inflicted predicament, but managed to restrain myself. Feeling that leaving it all to the lawyer wouldn't be enough to calm my feelings, I decided to confront them both. I would denounce them thoroughly on the spot. The lawyer arranged the date and time, and we decided to have the discussion at the law office. A few days later, the two reluctantly showed up at the law office. I thought they would bring their own lawyer, but it seemed they came alone. Jessica stormed into the office, flinging the door open. Mike followed, looking uncomfortable. "Finally, we meet, you coward." Jessica made no effort to hide her anger, but Mike stepped forward, trying to calm her down. "Well, you've been running away all this time. Our wedding's been delayed because of you." Jessica looked like she might throw her bag at me any moment, and Mike was desperately trying to hold her back as I watched them with a pitiful feeling. The lawyer nodded at me. "Please calm down. If any violence or abusive language occurs, we will immediately call the police." "Understood." The mention of the police made Jessica stiffen. With the lawyer's intervention, Jessica and Mike took their seats, becoming calmer. We sat across from each other at the office table, ready to start the discussion. "Mike, you're seeking a divorce, correct?" Jessica was sitting hotly, while Mike slumped, looking small. "We'd agree to the divorce. However, since your relationship is adultery, we will ask for alimony. Is there any significance to this?" Mike's face clouded over. "I'll agree to the divorce, but once the alimony is paid, don't contact us ever." I quietly nodded in agreement, and Jessica looked displeased, maybe expecting more resistance from me. When the lawyer began discussing the alimony amount, Jessica snapped. I said, "Any amount is fine. We have plenty of money." Jessica sat arrogantly with her arms crossed. The lawyer looked at her with interest, saying, "Oh yes, didn't he research? Mike is the president of a jewelry company with a yearly revenue of $2 billion. Mike looked up frantically, trying to restrain Jessica's arm. Jessica, her face flushed, continued excitedly, "Alimony for an affair is nothing to us. I'll even give a proper share of the property." Mike was trying hard to calm her down. Jessica shook off his hand and continued, "You can barely make ends meet on your salary, right?" She scoffed with a laugh. The lawyer burst into uncontrollable laughter. Jessica looked at him with a puzzled expression, and the lawyer wiped tears with a handkerchief. "Actually, the president is Linda." Jessica was dumbstruck, her mouth hanging open. Mike hung his head, his body trembling slightly. "Mike is just an ordinary employee with no position at Linda's company. I am Linda's corporate lawyer." Jessica started laughing loudly. "What are you talking about? Are you really a lawyer? Can lawyers lie?" The lawyer calmly replied, "Why not ask Mike next to you if what I said is a lie?" Mike, meanwhile, just bit his lip, looking down. Growing more anxious, Jessica grabbed Mike's arms and began shaking him. "You said you were the president of a $2 billion jewelry company. That's not a lie, right?" Mike remained silent, covering his face with his hands, uttering inaudible moans. Growing more desperate, Jessica gripped his arms tighter, repeatedly asking, "Answer me. It's not a lie, right?" Finally, Mike whispered in a raspy voice, "I'm sorry." Mike's single apology plunged the room into a deep silence. Jessica's strength seemed to leave her body, and she let her hands that were gripping Mike fall limply. "You said you were the president of a company making $2 billion a year," she muttered, almost to herself. Mike's solitary apology had plunged Jessica into despair. She stood up, trembling. "It's a lie, right? There's no way you're the president." Jessica pointed at me accusingly. "Why didn't I know about this after all we've shared?" I spoke to Jessica calmly, as if guiding her. "Just because we're close friends doesn't mean I tell you everything, especially since you were so fixated on money. I had no intention of telling you," I said, looking Jessica straight in the eyes without averting my gaze. Jessica seemed to lose all her energy and slumped down. "Then that house, of course. The house is in my name, so Mike will be the one leaving." Jessica fell silent, and Mike continued to hold his head. Mike probably didn't want to come here. He knew this would happen. But if he didn't come here, things would be worse. It's hell either way for him now. Mike is left with nothing but hell waiting for him. The lawyer began to present the evidence I had gathered. First, the photos of Mike and Jessica together, the photos sent to my phone, now printed. The lawyer placed an IC recorder on the table and played the recorded conversation. "Why would you send something like this?" "I just wanted to share our happiness with you." Jessica's voice filled the room, while Mike seemed to be holding back tears. "Hey, still clinging to the past. I want to divorce quickly." "I know what you're clinging to. It's Mike's income. He's the president of a $2 billion jewelry company, right?" "You hid it because you thought I might take it." Jessica, perhaps embarrassed, covered her face with her hands. "Hurry up a divorce and leave that condo. It'll be mine soon. Too bad Mike didn't come back to you. I'll give you as much alimony as you want." "Poor thing, your aim was the money, not Mike." "I'm speechless at how you've been deceived, Mike." Mike and Jessica fell silent. "Do you think this is over? What else is there, Jessica? You broke into the house when Linda wasn't there and stole several items, didn't you?" I felt relieved at the lawyer's calm demeanor. Mike looked shocked, apparently unaware of this. "Hey, what's this about stealing?" Jessica bit her lower lip, her hands shaking. "No, not me. I don't know anything." The lawyer placed a tablet on the table and played a video. It showed Jessica sneaking into the bedroom, taking bags and jewelry, and stuffing them into her bag. Jessica stared wide-eyed at the footage. "What is this? Why are you recording me? Isn't this illegal surveillance?" Mike covered his face with his hands. "We always had security cameras inside our house. Why didn't you tell me that earlier? Who would think you break in to steal?" "I felt a headache coming on from their foolish exchange, and you used my key without permission. I wanted those things. It's your fault for not buying them for me." The two began arguing, ignoring us. The lawyer and I could only look on in disbelief. "Please save your arguments for later. Regarding this theft, we will be filing a police report," the lawyer said calmly. Jessica seemed to panic at the mention of the police. "That's a bit much, isn't it?" I just borrowed something from a friend. I never gave you permission to borrow anything. I spoke to her calmly. Besides, you're not a friend or anything. You were just a classmate. That's why I'm filing a police report. Jessica started to kneel and apologize. I looked down at her and said coldly, "You're going to compensate. The value of what you stole is more than your annual income." "Are you sure about that?" Jessica was speechless. "And there's also the matter of the alimony." Jessica turned to Mike, pleading in a tearful voice, "You'll pay, right? Even if you're not the president, you still earn well, right?" Mike was silent, looking down. "He can't pay it because he's about to be fired," I said. Mike looked up in surprise. "That's correct. Since leaving the house, Mike has not shown up for work. Plus, with this commotion, there have been complaints from his boss," I explained. Mike looked like he might collapse on the floor. "But there's still the property division, right?" "I'll pay with that," Jessica said desperately. "That's not possible. Linda and Mike have a prenuptial agreement regarding property." "You didn't hear anything from Mike, did you?" "He never told you the inconvenient truths," I replied calmly. I regarded Mike with disdain as the lawyer placed the contract on the table. The agreement explicitly stated that if the marriage lasted less than 3 years, neither party could claim the other's property. Given that they were currently in the 2nd year of marriage, Jessica attempted to grab the document as if to tear it up. "You should handle that document carefully. It's a notarized deed, and you could be held legally accountable for damaging it," I warned. At the mention of potential legal consequences, Jessica halted her attempt to destroy the document and began to half-heartedly plead with Mike. "Mike, you have savings, right? Use that to pay," she suggested. Mike, looking at Jessica with resentful eyes, retorted, "What money? You always wanted sushi, steak. There's no way I have any savings left." "It appears that way. And it seems he has debts from unsavory sources," I added. Jessica's shoulders slumped, revealing the pitiable sight of the once glamorous appearance that used to turn heads. This was the result of the seeds she had sowed herself, leaving the two looking haggard and lost, muttering about how this wasn't supposed to happen and what they would do now. Deciding to leave the rest to the lawyer, I stood up to leave, emphasizing to Jessica, "Money isn't something you steal from others. It's something you earn through effort." After that, the divorce proceeded smoothly. I sent all of Mike's belongings back to his parents, who kept apologizing to me and even sent a letter of apology. Jessica, on the other hand, faced police interrogation for illegal entry and theft, leading to her arrest after admitting guilt. Although she showed remorse and an intent to compensate, her other crimes, including stealing from men she met on a dating app, suggested she might face a prison sentence. Mike, unable to live in Jessica's apartment, moved to an old apartment on the outskirts of town. Despite looking for a job, his unexplained absences and poor attitude at his last job made it challenging to get hired. He resorted to day labor to get by, receiving regular updates on their situations from the lawyer. I threw myself into work after the divorce. Currently, I am expanding our company's jewelry line to Europe, an idea that emerged during a break I took after the divorce. During that time, I had the chance to connect with the owner of a jewelry store in France. We bonded over shared experiences of divorce, and he agreed to showcase my company's jewelry in his store. Focusing on sales in France, I considered it a well-deserved perk after all I had been through.
The sound of footsteps on the street below felt like daggers piercing my soul. I had always had my grievances with my husband, but never to this extent. The way he could so easily destroy everything important to me. There was no coming back from that. Forgiving him was out of the question. I would make him regret ignoring me, my family, and his selfishness. My name is Jennifer, a 45-year-old housewife. I live in a small flat with my husband. Growing up, I was particularly close to my grandfather, a man I admired deeply. Even though my grandmother had passed, my grandfather remained strong and healthy for his age. We would meet occasionally, and his wisdom was something I cherished. A family must support each other no matter what. It's that support that makes us a family, he'd often say. Those words still echo in my heart. Family is about mutual care, not one-sided sacrifice. I wanted to live by his example, to build a life like his, but life had other plans. Before we got married, my husband seemed like a different man. He helped with chores and acted kind. But as soon as we started living together, he changed completely. I was left to do everything, cleaning, cooking, everything. Don't leave all the housework to me, I would plead with him time and again. His response was always the same. I'm tired from work. It's your job to handle the home. His dismissiveness turned our conversations into arguments. Why are you so selfish? I would ask, desperate for him to understand. But his answer was always the same. That's your role. You're useless as a wife if you can't even do that. The more he belittled me, the more I started to wonder if I was indeed the problem. But I couldn't shake my mother's words from my mind. Even as a stay-at-home wife, you're not supposed to do everything alone. A family works together. I tried to follow her advice, but nothing I said to my husband made any difference. Then the worst news arrived. My grandfather had collapsed and was rushed to the hospital. My mother called to tell me, and I knew I had to be with him. Can you handle things at home while I go visit Grandpa? I asked my husband. His response was as cold as ever. Why should you visit? You're the wife. Your place is at home. His words stung. Grandpa's seriously ill. I need to go, I insisted, but he shrugged it off. Who's going to take care of the house if you leave? I begged him to let me go, but he refused. I felt trapped, helpless. My mother tried to reassure me by taking care of everything, but my heart ached as Grandpa's condition worsened. I thought about visiting in secret, but I didn't have the means to get there. My husband had the car for work. Night after night, I lay awake, fearing I would never see my grandfather again. A month later, he passed away. I never got to say goodbye. At the funeral, seeing his face so frail and thin, I wept harder than anyone else. The sorrow of losing him consumed me, but it was soon followed by another blow, my growing indifference to my husband. Every day, I felt like a shell of myself, empty and disconnected. One day, out of the blue, my husband approached me. There's a place I want to take you. I need you to come with me, he said. For a brief moment, I hoped he was trying to make amends, that maybe he was finally willing to be the kind of partner my grandfather always spoke of. I followed him, clinging to that flicker of hope. We arrived in a quiet residential area. Nothing special about the place, no signs of change or reconciliation. We stopped in front of the house, and he pointed at it. What's this? I asked, confused. This, he said, is our new home. I stared at him in shock. A new home? Where did you get the money for this? He looked at me, completely unfazed. From your grandfather's inheritance. I know about it, even though you tried to hide it. With that much money, of course we can buy a house. I was speechless. I wasn't even allowed to visit my grandfather when he was dying, but my husband was ready to claim his inheritance. The betrayal felt like a knife in my heart. I couldn't comprehend how immoral and heartless his thinking was. He seemed to lack any trace of humanity. When I refused to give him the inheritance, he snapped back, "Your money is my money. Stop saying ridiculous things. Just hand over the money for the house." His selfishness brought tears to my eyes, and I noticed people passing by giving him cold stares as he laughed loudly, oblivious to their judgment. If I had known his true nature, I would have never married him. Why hadn't I seen it sooner? I felt a surge of anger. How could he trample on my feelings so easily? By this point, my love for him had completely vanished. You seem to misunderstand, I said, trying to stay calm. But I can't inherit my grandfather's estate. My words caught him off guard, and for a moment his face reflected surprise. But he quickly recovered, smirking as if mocking me. Don't lie just because you don't want to give me the money. I know your grandfather left it all to you. Yes, he did, I admitted. It was written in his will, but I renounced the inheritance. Even if I had accepted it, I wouldn't use his estate for you. I couldn't bear to see my grandfather's legacy wasted on someone like you. His face reddened with fury. What? You can't just give it up. Go and get it back right now. We won't be able to make the loan payments. I'm sorry, but I can't do that. I won't hand over my grandfather's estate to someone who only cares about money. My words hit hard, and he lost his composure, shouting, Don't get smart with me. But his anger no longer had any power over me. His threats felt hollow, the desperate rantings of a man who had lost control. I thought back to my grandfather, and it only deepened my resolve. This man, who refused to let me visit my dying grandfather, had no right to the inheritance. Families are meant to support each other, but he showed no such care. He wasn't family anymore, and his fate was no longer my concern. What mattered most was honoring my grandfather's memory, and with that, I felt a sense of peace. What about the loan? My husband, realizing I wouldn't back down, looked panicked. I don't know, I replied coldly. Solve it yourself. Flustered, he fumbled for his phone. Hello, Mom, he said, his voice shaky. I soon saw my mother-in-law rushing toward us, her face full of confusion. What's going on? She asked, looking between the two of us. I calmly explained, your son bought a house without telling me and planned to use my grandfather's inheritance to pay for it. And despite my grandfather being on his deathbed, he refused to let me visit him. My mother-in-law's face turned red with anger as she processed what I said. She glanced at her son, who gave her a sheepish nod in confirmation. Why would you do that? She shouted, her voice full of fury. You didn't even let her see her grandfather, and now you want the inheritance. That's irresponsible. Before anyone could react, she slapped him hard across the face. My husband, clearly shocked by the sudden scolding, began to cry. I didn't mean it like that, he sobbed, his cries echoing down the quiet residential street. But his mother wasn't done. Apologize to Jennifer, she demanded, her voice sharp. You acted like a terrible person. Mom, please don't scold me so much. I thought I was doing the right thing, he whimpered through his tears. Learn the difference between right and wrong, she replied sternly. What you did was completely wrong. I'm sorry, he muttered, his voice barely audible as he offered his apology. But it was too late. Any remorse from him meant nothing now. I'm sorry, my husband apologized again, but by then, I felt like a spectator in my own life. Watching everything unfold, a sense of relief washed over me. I truly am sorry, he repeated, and even my mother-in-law chimed in. Jennifer, please forgive us. My husband begged. Jennifer, help me, but when his mother shot him a harsh glare, he let out a sad, defeated sigh. Seeing the grown man cry like that was pitiful, and as I watched this absurd scene, I finally said what mattered most. Let's get a divorce. His face, already pale, turned ghostly white. But I apologized. There are things we can't fix with just an apology. Our values don't align, I continued. I wish I had realized it sooner. Don't say that. I'm nothing without you. My husband clung to my feet, desperate. What about the house? The mortgage? I can't do anything without you. That's not my problem anymore, I said coldly. I'm done with you, so give up. He looked devastated, but I had no intention of comforting him. No matter how much he pleaded, my mind was made up. My mother-in-law, seeing me shake my head, said firmly, if you want a divorce, go ahead. I'll deal with my foolish son. Yes, please, I replied. I never want to see him again. With that, she took him by the arm and led him back to her house. Even as he walked away, he kept shouting, help me, Jennifer. But my heart was frozen, unmoved by his cries. The divorce process was swift. My ex-husband resisted at first, but under pressure from his mother, he eventually agreed. Since the divorce was his fault, I was granted alimony for the emotional distress he caused me. He also had to take full responsibility for the mortgage, as the house was in his name. I knew he would struggle with both payments, but that wasn't my concern anymore. Time passed, and I ran into his mother one day. She told me that after the divorce and the crushing weight of the mortgage, my ex-husband stopped going to work. He missed so many days that his company eventually fired him. Now, he works part-time at a construction site, constantly scolded by his mother. She said he doesn't get along with his co-workers and complains daily about wanting to quit. But his mother won't allow it. As for me, I rebuilt my life. I found a new job that welcomed me despite my lack of recent experience. A kind mentor helped me learn the ropes, and I quickly adapted. Now, I'm even in charge of training new employees. My life now is far more fulfilling than during my marriage. I feel confident again, proud of who I've become. Soon, I plan to visit my grandfather's grave. I want to tell him everything that's happened, knowing he's watching over me with a smile from above. From now on, the four of us will live together, my son Ben says with a laugh as he walks in. Come on, let us in quickly, and order something fancy for dinner, he jokes, making demands over the phone. It's a new chapter, and this time, I feel ready for whatever comes next. I was completely astounded by his selfishness. That's impossible. I'm still in the middle of sorting things out at the new house, I exclaimed, my frustration mounting. What new house? Ben's voice was filled with confusion. In the background, I could hear his wife, Kate, sounding furious. You can't always have things your way. My name is Nancy, a 56-year-old homemaker. I've been married to Ken for 30 years. We met at work and got engaged about a year after we started dating. I will always make you happy, so please marry me, he said sincerely, and those words meant the world to me. Even now, 30 years into our marriage, Ken still makes me happy. I'm truly glad to have married him. About a year after our wedding, I became pregnant. It was unexpected but a joyful surprise for both of us. We had always hoped for a child. We named our son Ben. He was an adorable baby, and we cherished him, raising him with all our love. As he grew older and started to speak, our days became even more joyful, filled with his laughter and innocent mischief. Time flew by, and soon Ben was ready to start elementary school. We hoped he would make many friends and excel in his studies. However, things didn't go as smoothly as we hoped. As soon as Ben started school, he began causing trouble. He was always lively and mischievous at home, but his behavior at school seemed out of control. He disrupted classes and made his classmates cry with his selfishness. Every time the school called, I found myself apologizing, and Ken and I would scold Ben, trying to make him understand why his actions were wrong. Unfortunately, he didn't see it that way and felt our scolding was unfair. Nothing seemed to change his behavior. Ben struggled with his studies, unable to concentrate, and his teachers often pointed out his poor grades. We worried about our parenting and tried everything from tutoring to private lessons, but his grades remained poor. In middle school, the issues continued. He frequently disrupted classes and once even injured another child, which led us to apologize to the child's family. Ben was clearly seen as a problematic student at school. Whenever I attended open house or parent-teacher conferences, I noticed that other parents avoided me, making it difficult to make friends. It was a tough time for our family. Despite these challenges, Ben managed to advance to high school. Ken and I hoped he would graduate successfully. We allowed Ben to take up a part-time job, but only on the condition that he continued to study diligently. He often spent his allowance too quickly, so we provided him with only a modest amount, hoping he would learn to manage his finances better. Earning his own money seemed to make him very happy, and he worked almost daily at his part-time job, earning a considerable sum for a high school student. Remarkably, he kept his promise and did not neglect his studies. He worked hard even in subjects he found challenging, and as a result, we no longer received any calls from his school about his behavior. Ken and I were amazed by this sudden change in Ben. However, despite his hard work, Ben spent all his earnings and had no savings. He bought numerous luxury items, and his wallets and bags were more expensive than mine, which shocked me. Eventually, Ben graduated from high school, an achievement that once seemed almost impossible. Moreover, he was offered a full-time position at the grocery store where he had worked part-time for 3 years. His securing a stable job was a great relief for us as his parents. When Ben got the job, he decided he wanted to move out to live independently and freely. Although I felt a pang of sadness at the thought of him leaving home, considering all the effort we had put into raising him, I also understood his desire to spread his wings and find his own path. I also recognized that Ben was now a grown man, and seeing him work hard was a good thing, or so I believed. After Ben moved out, he rarely returned home. We had hoped he would come back at least for Christmas, but he didn't. It was his first year living on his own, so maybe he wanted to enjoy the freedom, although it was disappointing. Ken and I didn't push him. We assumed that future holidays would just be the two of us. However, as time passed, there were still no signs of Ben returning. He didn't come home during the summer vacation or any other time, and there was no contact from him. Worried about his safety, we tried to reach out. After several attempts, he finally answered the phone. "What? You're being annoying. What do you want?" Ben responded, clearly irritated. "Ben, we were worried about you. You haven't come home or contacted us since you left," I said, feeling both relief and frustration. "You're calling me repeatedly just for that." "I'm fine," he replied dismissively. "It's not just that. We were really worried. Can't you come home at least once a year?" I pleaded. "Fine, I get it. I'm hanging up now," Ben said and quickly ended the call. I wasn't sure if he didn't understand how much parents worry or if he was just being self-centered. Either way, I was relieved to know he was safe, even if it was a small comfort. After that, Ben rarely returned home, and we nearly gave up hope of seeing him again. Then, about 5 years after he had moved out, he suddenly appeared at our doorstep. "Mom, Dad, it's been a while." Ben greeted us casually. "Ben? You're here so suddenly. Is something wrong?" I asked, surprised by his unexpected visit. "Something wrong? Didn't Mom tell me to come back?" he replied. "That's true, but you could have at least informed us beforehand." "Sorry, but you're happy to see me, right?" he said, brushing off my concerns. "Yes, of course. Have you been well? You haven't contacted us at all." "Okay, Dad, no lectures, please. I'm fine. I came today because I have something important to tell you." "Something important?" I asked, feeling a sense of unease. "Actually, I'm getting married," Ben announced, casually dropping the bombshell. "Married?" Ken and I were shocked. "Yeah, relax. I'll bring my fiancée next week. You can meet her," Ben said nonchalantly. "Of course, but getting married so soon. You're only 23, Ben," I said, still trying to process the news. "People get married at this age all the time," he responded confidently. As if his sudden visit wasn't surprising enough, this news left us completely stunned. A week later, Ben returned with his fiancée Kate. She was 21, 2 years younger than Ben, and she fit the image of a modern young woman, flashy and confident. They had met at the grocery store where Ben worked and decided to get married. "Are you sure you want to get married so young?" I asked, feeling concerned. "Well, actually," Kate began, her voice softening, "I'm pregnant. That's why we need to get married." "Pregnant?" I blurted out, caught off guard by yet another revelation. "Didn't I mention it?" Ben asked, clearly having forgotten to tell us about this important detail. "We hadn't heard anything about it," Ken said, looking as shocked as I was. "So, you're getting married because of the pregnancy?" I asked, still trying to wrap my head around everything. "Exactly. We want to have the wedding before Kate's belly becomes noticeable," Ben explained. The conversation moved quickly, and we struggled to keep up. Then Ben made a request that floored us even more. "Actually, we need to pay a deposit for the wedding venue soon, and we're a bit short. Can you guys cover it?" "What?" Ken and I were speechless. After all the shocking news, now he was asking for financial help. "We can't just come up with money like that on such short notice," I said, trying to remain calm. "Well, we're in trouble too. We've already invited friends to the wedding," Ben said, visibly upset. "That's putting the cart before the horse," Ken said, frustrated. Ben and Kate looked hurt. "I didn't think my parents would be so heartless. You're okay with us being sad because we can't have our wedding?" Ben said, his voice laced with disappointment. "That's not what we mean, Ben," I said softly. "Then as parents, shouldn't you at least cover the wedding expenses?" Ben asked, his frustration growing. Though it felt unreasonable, we didn't want to ruin their important day. Reluctantly, we agreed to prepay the wedding expenses, draining $113,000 from our savings. It was exhausting, both mentally and physically, but seeing Ben and Kate happy made us accept the situation. The meeting with both families went well, and Ben's wedding was a beautiful ceremony. We were relieved it had gone smoothly. After Kate gave birth, however, a new problem arose. The couple wouldn't let us see our grandchild Mike. When we tried to visit the hospital, Ben told us Kate was too tired and needed rest. That seemed reasonable, so we waited. Months passed, and still, Ben didn't initiate contact. Every time we reached out, we were told it wasn't a good time to meet Mike. We felt uncomfortable with how distant Ben and Kate had become, but they didn't forget to remind us about the birth celebration gift. They never visited, and their home address remained a mystery to us. It wasn't until a year later, during the Christmas holidays, that we finally met Mike. They visited briefly, just for a short talk at the front door, and we got to hold Mike only once. During that brief interaction, they demanded $200 for a Christmas gift. Afterward, as expected, Ben and his family disappeared again. 4 years passed quickly. One day, Ben and Kate suddenly visited our house again. To our surprise, they had another child, now 3 years old, and their older son, Mike, was already 5. He had grown so much that we might not have recognized him on the street. "Why are you here today?" Ken asked, sensing that something was off. I couldn't truly rejoice at seeing our grandchildren's faces after all these years, especially since Ben and Kate had shown up unannounced. After cutting ties with us for so long, I was suspicious of their sudden reappearance. My instincts told me this wasn't good news. Then Ben dropped the bombshell. "We're planning to move in here," Ben announced, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Are you serious? You mean, live together?" I asked, trying to process the shock. Yes, I thought Mom and Dad would be happy. You can be with your grandchildren and me every day, Ben said, clearly believing we'd welcome them with open arms. But why all of a sudden? I pressed. Well, we won't have to pay rent, and you two can help with the kids, Ben replied, proudly revealing his motive. It hit me then. After not seeing our grandchildren for 4 years, they now wanted to move in for free childcare and rent. I wasn't having it. It's the same whether we see them now or not, I said, feeling a growing sense of frustration. Ken nodded in agreement. Exactly. We've been ignored for years, and now we're only good enough when you need something. Ben was furious. What are you saying? I'm offering to live together. I was even thinking about taking care of you in the future. Anyway, moving in is a done deal. With that, he stormed out with his family, leaving us stunned. We had raised our son, and part of me felt responsible for how he turned out, but Ben was an adult now. He had his own family, and it wasn't our job to step in anymore. Ken and I firmly decided that we would not live with them. However, Ben and Kate were clearly serious about moving in. A few days later, boxes began arriving at our house, sent by Ben. It seemed they were planning to move in by force. Though the boxes were here, Ben and his family weren't yet. They were likely planning to show up later. Ken and I acted quickly. We changed the locks on the house and called a moving company. Luckily, we owned a condo that we'd bought as an investment, and we decided to move there instead. The movers were available the next morning, so we arranged everything swiftly. We transported some of our things ourselves, while the larger items were handled by professionals. We even contacted a real estate agent to start the process of selling the house. We weren't about to let Ben and Kate bulldoze their way into our lives. The next morning, the movers completed the job, and by the time Ben and his family arrived, we were gone. We had managed to avoid their plans just in time. Later that afternoon, Ben called. Hey, is something wrong? No, the question is, what's going on with you? I replied calmly. Ben half laughed. We're coming over today. The 4 of us will be moving in. Without waiting for a response, he hung up. Ken and I were concerned. We continued unpacking in our new home. An hour later, Ben called again, sounding confused. What's going on? Our boxes are outside, the key doesn't work, and I've been ringing the doorbell. Let us in and get dinner ready or order something fancy for delivery. His entitled demands astounded me. It's impossible, I replied. We're unpacking at our new house. New house? Ben asked, bewildered. That's right, we decided not to live with you. You sent your belongings without our consent, so we moved to avoid you. You moved? You couldn't have found a place so quickly. We already had another property. If we had told you, you would have insisted on living together. We had our own emergency plan. Ben fell silent for a moment. I could hear Kate shouting in the background. That house is already sold, so it's pointless to try and live there, I added. Ben sounded utterly defeated. You always get your way, he muttered before hanging up. Without hesitation, I blocked his number. Unfortunately, our warnings didn't seem to reach Ben. In a shocking move, he and his family broke a window to enter the house, moving in their belongings as if it were theirs. Naturally, we reported them to the real estate agency, and they were promptly arrested. During the arrest, Ben resisted, shouting, "This is my childhood home. What's wrong with staying here?" The police subdued him, and the entire incident was witnessed by neighbors and passers-by. Some even recorded the scene and posted it on social media, spreading the news far and wide. As a result, Ben was fired from his job the very next day. His reputation was ruined, and following his arrest, his life unraveled. I later heard that he and Kate divorced. She took their children and moved back to her parents' home, where she now works full-time. Her parents, furious about the situation, manage her salary to save for the children's education. As for Ben, I don't know what he's doing now, and frankly, I no longer care. Ken and I believe we've done enough for him. From now on, we're focused on living happily together, just the 2 of us. Hi there, I'm Jennifer, just your average straightforward person with quite a tale to share. It's a story of heartbreak, resilience, and unexpected strength. A few years ago, life threw me a curveball I never saw coming. My husband Frank and I were living what seemed like the perfect life. Our cozy suburban home, our dog Billy, and dreams of starting a family. But then, out of nowhere, our lives took a sharp turn. I experienced a miscarriage that hit us like a relentless blow, shaking us to our core and challenging our marriage. We suddenly found ourselves lost in a whirlwind of pain and confusion. Frank and I had always been a solid team, committed to facing life's challenges together. However, this loss casts a shadow over us, infiltrating every aspect of our relationship. Conversations turned into arguments, simple joys felt elusive, and the intimacy we once shared began to fade. Adding to the strain was my mother-in-law, Betty, who had been eager for grandchildren since the day we tied the knot. The pressure from her felt like a ticking clock, amplifying our already heavy hearts. Despite countless doctor visits and treatments, my fertility issues persisted. The emotional roller coaster of hope and despair was overwhelming, with each positive test leading to crushing heartbreak. I vividly recall the devastating conversations with Frank where our frustration and hope spilled out in equal measure. "It's not fair, Jennifer. We've tried so hard," he'd say, his voice thick with disappointment. "I know, Frank. I never wanted this," I would reply, feeling the weight of our shared dreams crumbling around us. Life seemed determined to challenge us, and with each passing year, the burden grew heavier. Friends and family offered their support, but the journey of trying to conceive remained daunting, a profound weight that loomed over us, growing more burdensome as time marched on. Yet through these trials, Frank and I discovered the depths of our strength and the resilience of our bond. Our path wasn't easy, but it was ours, filled with lessons about love, hardship, and the intricate journey of life. It didn't go unnoticed by friends and family that we were still childless. Their well-meaning inquiries about when we might welcome a little one often felt more like pressure than support. But Betty took it to another level entirely. Every family gathering with her turned into a relentless interrogation about our plans to start a family. It often felt as if she were pointing the finger at me, as though the absence of children rested solely on my shoulders, especially given my fertility struggles. "Jennifer, it's so lovely to see you. How have you been?" Betty would begin sweetly. "I've been good, Betty. Thanks for asking," I would reply, bracing myself for what came next. "Any good news to share? How about a little one on the way?" "Betty, we've talked about this. We're still trying, but it's not that simple," I'd respond, trying to keep my frustration at bay. I'd respond, trying to keep my tone light. "Oh dear, are you sure you're doing everything right? You've been married for quite some time now. Maybe it's time to see a specialist." "Yes, Betty, we've seen specialists. We're doing everything we can. It's just not happening as easily as you might think." "Well, maybe you should try some natural remedies. I've heard that herbal teas in certain positions can help. I really want a grandbaby." "Betty, this is a private matter. We're handling it the best we can," I'd insist, hoping to steer the conversation away. "Oh please, private? We're family. We should be able to discuss these things openly." "I understand that, Betty, but let's just enjoy our time together today without discussing this, okay?" "All right, dear, but tick-tock, time is wasting, and soon you won't be able to have kids." "I'll keep that in mind, Betty." It was always like this. I felt an immense weight of pressure and shame for not meeting her expectations of a perfect daughter-in-law who would bless her with grandchildren. Ironically, she never imposed such expectations on her own daughter, who wasn't even married yet and seemed to escape scrutiny. It was incredibly frustrating. This period in our lives was tremendously challenging. The pressure from Betty only continued to build, and it felt like she was constantly holding my fertility struggles against me. I could see the strain it was putting on both Frank and me. I suggested adoption several times, but Frank was adamant about having a biological child, which led to heated arguments between us. The tension from these discussions, coupled with external pressures, made everything even harder. I expressed to Frank how painful and unfair it felt to distinguish between biological and adopted children. As to me, all children deserve love equally. Yet he remained focused on having a biological child, a desire that weighed heavily on both our hearts. I couldn't shake the thought of the countless children out there longing for a family, which only deepened my sadness. As for Betty, her attitude escalated to overtly harsh territory. She relentlessly blamed me for her inability to have children, as if my fertility issues were something I could resolve with a little more effort. It created an unbearable situation where I was fighting to preserve my marriage while enduring constant judgment and reproach. It was an emotionally draining ordeal. Betty never hesitated to express her dissatisfaction. "Jennifer, you need to fix this and fast. You're the reason we don't have any grandchildren yet," she'd confront me. "Betty, I've been trying everything I can. It's not as simple as you think. I'm dealing with fertility issues," I'd reply, my patience wearing thin. "Well, you need to try harder. We can't let our family line end with you," she retorted, her fixation feeling almost dystopian, as if she expected me to fulfill some sort of Handmaid's Tale scenario. Overwhelmed, I decided to seek some insight from my sister-in-law, Amy, who always seemed more empathetic. "Amy, I don't understand why your mom is so fixated on me having a baby. It's not entirely under my control, and she's making my life miserable." I confided in Amy, hoping for clarity. "Jennifer, it's not just about grandkids," she hesitated, hinting at something deeper. After some coaxing, she revealed her troubling thoughts. "I overheard Mom talking to some family friends. She's worried that Frank might leave you for someone younger, someone who can have kids." "What? Frank would never do that. Why would you even think such a thing?" I was shocked. "I know you believe that, but remember, Frank was quite the ladies' man before. I didn't want to say anything because he's my brother, and I'm loyal to him. You're lucky I'm even sharing this with you," Amy admitted. "Honestly, I think Mom might have a point." "Yeah, Jennifer, time is ticking," she added, echoing the harsh reality looming over us. This revelation shook me deeply, intertwining my marital uncertainties with the invasive pressures from Betty and adding layers of complexity to an already strained relationship. Hearing about the possibility of Frank leaving me for someone younger left me staggered. Amy hinted at a younger coworker, an intern around 25 years old, with whom Frank seemed to enjoy chatting a bit too much. The thought that my husband could even consider leaving me, or worse, engaging with other women behind my back, was shattering. My heart felt like it was being torn apart by the potential betrayal. After grappling with my suspicions and the agony they caused, I reached a breaking point. The distance between Frank and me had widened into an unbridgeable chasm, and I knew it was time for a confrontation. One evening, sensing my withdrawal and standoffishness, Frank asked me about it. Overwhelmed by pain and frustration, I confronted him directly about his fidelity. Initially, Frank denied everything, as anyone might in such a shocking situation, but as the conversation wore on, he eventually confessed to his indiscretions. The revelation of his affair with a younger coworker unleashed a torrent of emotions within me. In a moment of intense anger and hurt, I slapped him, a stark reflection of the pain he had inflicted. Frank's reaction was predictably mixed with pleas and requests for forgiveness, but I could see right through it. Over the years, I had built a stable and prosperous life for myself, making wise financial decisions and advancing in my career. It dawned on me that Frank might have been holding on to our failing marriage, not just out of love or a desire for a child, but perhaps also to secure a financial safety net through potential child support payments in the event of a divorce. Feeling manipulated and used, I declared that I wanted a divorce. I was exhausted by the deceit and emotional turmoil. "How could you, Frank? How could you betray me like this?" I demanded, my voice shaking with disbelief. "Jennifer, please just listen. I messed up. I know I did. I'm so sorry," he pleaded, desperation dripping from his words. "Sorry doesn't cut it, Frank. You cheated on me with someone from your office." I shot back, my rage bubbling to the surface. "Jennifer, you have to understand. I was feeling so inadequate, so unfulfilled. I thought having a child would make me feel like I was worth something," he tried to explain. "Oh, so you thought cheating on your wife was the solution? Did you really believe that sleeping with someone else would magically make you a better person?" My disbelief turned to scorn as I confronted him. In that moment, the truth of our situation became painfully clear. Frank's betrayal wasn't just a lapse in judgment, it was a deliberate choice that shattered the foundation of our marriage. "No, of course not. I was foolish to think that way. I didn't know what else to do." Frank stammered, his desperation evident. "You didn't know what to do, so you chose to hurt me instead. Do you even realize the pain you've caused?" My voice was filled with disbelief and hurt. "Jennifer, I can't lose you. Please let me make this right. I'll do anything," he begged, his voice cracking with emotion. "Do you really think you can undo this with a few hollow promises? You need to grow up, Frank, and take responsibility for your actions," I replied sternly, my resolve hardening. As I sat in the lawyer's office signing the final divorce papers, a profound sense of relief washed over me. The weight of a broken marriage and the sting of Frank's betrayal were finally lifting, and I could breathe freely again. Despite Betty and Amy's attempts to convince me otherwise, their pleas couldn't mask the deceit they too had harbored. I knew what was right for me, and staying with a man who had been unfaithful was no longer an option. With the prenuptial agreement in place, the divorce proceedings were swift. I retained the house, my sanctuary where I could start anew. Frank, on the other hand, had to move back in with his mother, a situation he found far from ideal. The day the divorce was finalized, I left the lawyer's office feeling liberated from a toxic relationship. But as I drove home, a sudden wave of nausea overwhelmed me. I quickly pulled over, stumbled out of the car, and barely made it to the roadside before I threw up. The twisting in my stomach felt like the emotional toll of the divorce finally catching up with me. But as the nausea persisted over the following days, I realized this was only the beginning of my journey. I started to suspect there was more to this situation. The very next day, I was jolted awake by the incessant ringing of my doorbell. To my dismay, it was Frank, Betty, and Amy causing a commotion outside. They barged into my home uninvited, shouting about the prenuptial agreement and how it was unfair to leave Frank with so little, given my financial status. Betty wasted no time in cutting to the chase. "Jennifer, we're here to collect some money as compensation for all the years Frank wasted with you," she declared brazenly. "Have you lost your mind? Don't you realize the divorce is finalized?" I retorted, incredulous at their audacity and the absurdity of their demands. Their presence in my home, making such outrageous claims, was the last thing I needed after everything that had transpired. "I don't owe him anything," I insisted, my voice rising with frustration. "Sure, but this sounds like some sort of side deal, right?" Frank argued, trying to justify his demand. "A side deal?" I echoed, incredulous. "Yes," he insisted. "Jennifer, you've put me through a lot, and I need compensation. You're lucky we aren't taking this to court." Amy nodded in agreement beside him. "Yeah, he's been through so much stress because of you. We think $150,000 should cover it." I was stunned by their audacity. A fire ignited within me as I faced them, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. "Are you kidding me? Do you really think you deserve compensation for the years I spent trying to make our marriage work? If anything, I'm the one who deserves compensation." I knew Frank was practically broke and had no way to pay me anything, yet here they were, attempting to bully me into giving them money. Refusing to be intimidated, I declared, "The whole point of a prenup is to protect my assets. You need to leave my house immediately." But then a plan began to form in my mind, one that would truly shock them. "Wait just one moment. Before you go, I need to show you something." My heart pounded in anticipation as I hurried upstairs. When I returned, I held the pregnancy test in my trembling hand. Their eyes widened with shock and disbelief as they saw the positive result. As they passed the test around, I explained, "I threw up last night and decided to take the test on a whim." The result was unexpected, to say the least. Later today, I have a hospital appointment to determine how far along I am. Frank, Betty, and Amy stood there, jaws practically on the floor, unable to comprehend the twist of fate that had just unfolded before them. "You know what, Betty, Amy? Karma is a real piece of work, and I guess the universe decided it was time to bless me. I'm having a baby, but I'm no longer tied to any of you. The baby might be Frank's, but this baby is going to be all mine." "I will change my mind," I declared firmly. Betty and Amy exchanged worried glances before Betty spoke up, her voice tentative. "Jennifer, let's not be too hasty. We could work something out and discuss an arrangement." Frank finally found his voice, mumbling incoherent apologies, his eyes brimming with regret. But I wasn't interested in any of it. I had endured enough of their manipulation and toxicity. No more arrangements, no more excuses. Get off my property, all of you, before I call the police. "I'm done with this toxic circus," I stated resolutely, my decision. I could feel their desperation to change my mind. But after years of their emotional pressure, I was unwavering. I had built an emotional barrier that wouldn't be easily breached. In our tense standoff, Betty broke the silence, her voice tinged with desperation. "Jennifer, you have to understand that we care about this family. We want what's best for you and the baby. Frank may have made mistakes he knew about, by the way, but that's not important right now. He's the father, and he has a right to be in his child's life." Yeah, Jennifer, you know how long we've been waiting for this. We can make this work. Trust me, she continued, trying to persuade me. I sighed, struggling to keep my composure. I understand your concern, but what you fail to grasp is that Frank's actions caused this rift in our marriage. He cheated on me. Betty, you're a smart woman. I'm sure you don't even believe what you're saying. You three are just trying to get into my life to access my money. That's ridiculous. Yes, I agree you're taking this too far, Frank chimed in, his voice shaky. Jennifer, I messed up big time. I regret what I did, and I'm willing to make amends for the sake of our child. Can't we try to work this out? I looked at him, my eyes filled with a mix of anger and sadness. Frank, this isn't just about your infidelity. It's about years of emotional manipulation and pressure from your mother and sister. I've endured so much because of your family, and I can't go back to that toxic environment. Amy tried a different approach, her voice softer, attempting to sound conciliatory. Jennifer, we admit we made mistakes too. We were too pushy, and we're sorry for that. But we only wanted what was best for you, even if we went about it the wrong way. Please, for the sake of the family, reconsider. But I wasn't swayed. Sure, Amy, but it doesn't change what happened. I've made my decision. I want a fresh start for myself and my child, away from the constant pressure and guilt trips. So, thanks, but no thanks. Clearly frustrated, Betty raised her voice. You're being unreasonable, Jennifer. You can't just cut us out like this. I took a deep breath, my patience wearing thin. I can and I will. My priority now is the well-being of my child, I asserted firmly. Their attempts at reconciliation felt shallow, and their motives were transparent. In that moment, I knew I needed to stand strong, not just for myself, but for the future of my child, free from the turmoil and the strings attached by Frank and his family. I've decided not to expose my child to such a toxic environment. You all need to leave. I won't change my mind, I stated, my voice resolute. Amy's eyes filled with tears as her voice trembled. Jennifer, please don't do this. We love you and want to be a part of your life and your baby's life. As I had mentioned before, you can have a relationship with the baby, but I will not compromise my happiness and mental health for anyone. Please, I don't want to repeat myself. I struggled to maintain my calm. Frank, who had been quietly weeping throughout the conversation, finally spoke up, his voice cracking with emotion. Jennifer, please reconsider. I'll do whatever it takes to make things right. I'm sorry about those girls. They meant nothing. I looked at him, feeling a pang for the man I once loved. Frank, it's too late for us. But you can still be a good father to our child. Just remember that actions speak louder than words. With that, I turned and walked away, locking the door behind them. Betty, Amy, and Frank stood there, their faces a mix of sadness and regret. It was time to start a new chapter in my life, one where I could breathe freely without the weight of their expectations and demands. Life had indeed taken a turn for the better. I had my beautiful baby girl, the center of my universe. She was healthy and thriving, a source of immeasurable joy. Each day spent with her filled my heart with love and gratitude. I decided to allow supervised visits with Frank, Betty, and Amy, believing my daughter deserved to know her father and connect with her paternal family. However, I set clear boundaries, expecting them to be respected. Yet every visit seemed to come with the same chorus of pleas and accusations. They insisted I was being selfish for not reuniting with Frank. The pressure and guilt-tripping were relentless, wearing down my patience. One day, during another supervised visit, the familiar arguments erupted. Betty and Amy launched into their usual tirade about how I was tearing the family apart, claiming I was depriving my daughter of a complete family and that she deserved to have her parents together. I had had enough. After gently placing my baby girl in her crib, I turned to face them, my voice firm yet weary. I've been patient, I began, ready to reassert my boundaries and defend the peaceful life I had fought so hard to create for my daughter and myself. I've strived to maintain a civil relationship for the sake of our child, but the constant badgering and shouting are simply unacceptable. When Frank attempted to intervene, saying, Jennifer, please can't we talk about this? I firmly shook my head. No, Frank, this isn't up for debate. I've made my decision, and it's final. I won't tolerate this environment for our daughter. My resolve was clear. Betty and Amy exchanged frustrated glances but continued to argue, accusing me of being rigid and unreasonable. Taking a deep breath, I addressed them sternly. This is your last warning. If you can't respect my boundaries and continue to pressure me, you won't be allowed to see her anymore. I won't expose her to this toxic behavior. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Frank finally stepped in. Mom, Amy, please. We need to respect Jennifer's wishes. Our daughter deserves a peaceful and loving environment, he pleaded. Betty and Amy fell silent, their faces reflecting disappointment and resignation. It seemed they finally understood that their constant interference was only pushing them further away from their granddaughter. From that day forward, our visits became more peaceful. While they still harbored hopes for a reunion between Frank and me, they no longer pressed the issue. Although I could tell they were still remorseful, my focus remained elsewhere. I had more important things to prioritize: the well-being and happiness of my daughter, who continued to thrive. She was surrounded by love from people who genuinely cared about her well-being and mine. The change in dynamics allowed us to foster a calmer, more nurturing environment, free from previous tensions and conducive to her growth and happiness.
My name is Rose Watson, and I've been married for a decade, living separately from my mother-in-law who resides far away. Recently, I learned that she's retired and suffering from a debilitating backache, preventing her from working. Consequently, my husband has been diligently sending her money each month. "Hey, make sure to transfer this month's money to Mom, will you?" he asked. I assured him, sure, no problem. I won't forget. Even if I forget everything else, thanks. That helps a lot. I appreciate it. My husband visits his mother at least once a month, assisting her with tasks she can no longer manage. However, on one occasion, he returned from her place agitated, suddenly accusing me. "What the hell have you done?" Perplexed by his sudden anger, I stared blankly as he continued accusing me. "All this time, I've been struggling to send her money, and you didn't care about my feelings. I told you to transfer $1,000 every month." "I did transfer it," I insisted. "I'm telling you it's not been transferred. Do you have any idea how hard it is to send that $1,000? I understand. I've had to take part-time jobs and scrounge for money just for that," he retorted. "Knowing all that, why didn't you send it?" "I did send it." "Why are you saying this?" "Just calm down a bit," I urged. "How can I be calm when Mom is struggling because she doesn't get the money from me and has even started doing piecework?" he exclaimed. "But I definitely did send it." "Are you saying my mom is lying?" I questioned. "Then there's no way my mom would lie to me. You can't just make an assumption and then get mad when it's not true. I don't even know why this is happening. I've been sending her the money you give me every month. Then why is she doing piecework? She's in pain, lifting heavy boxes. I don't know about that. I haven't seen it. You never go to my family home. I go every month, but you never come with me. You just don't care about my mom," he accused. "That's not true. There's no need for me to go every month, and it's so far away. I don't want to waste my only day off," I defended. "Waste your day off? It's visiting family. How can that be a waste?" he argued. "Well, that's your family. You wouldn't think twice about it, but you don't go to my family's house, do you?" I responded. "Of course not. You married into my family, but I didn't marry into yours. You shouldn't say things like that. It only causes trouble," he countered. "You're the one causing trouble," I muttered to myself, wondering if he even realized what he was saying. Frustrated, I tried to escape to the kitchen, but he followed me, still angry. "Huh. I'm not running away. I just want you to calm down. Maybe we should have a coffee and talk this through," I suggested. "I don't need that. Give me back all the money I've been giving you to send to my mom," he demanded. "Why are you saying that? I'm your wife of 10 years. I've never lied to you. You should just believe me when I say I've sent it," I pleaded. "I bet you've been spending my money. What'd you buy? Where's the $1,000 going every month?" he accused. "If I had bought something, there'd be new things in the house, right? But there aren't. If it were clothes, there'd be new clothes, but there aren't. I haven't bought a single piece of jewelry since we got married. I don't understand why you're accusing me. I defended. Even so, you must be using it for something. Or maybe you're saving it for yourself, planning to leave me, he speculated. Why would you even think of divorce? We have kids, I questioned, bewildered by the sudden turn in our conversation. I would never entertain such thoughts. How am I supposed to know I can't trust someone who lies like you? Why won't you understand that I've been sending the money to your mom? Then why isn't it reaching her? I have no idea. Could you be sending it to the wrong place? No way. I have your mom's bank account number registered with a bank. Unless she changes it, there's no way that could happen. Then the only thing I can think of is that you're stealing it. Stealing? Yeah, that's right. You're stealing my money, not sending it to my mom. That's it. I want a divorce. I can't be with a thief like you. Let's get divorced. It's clear you've been stealing the $1,000 meant for my mom every month. Hold on. Why does it have to come to this? What about our kids? I don't care about the kids. I don't need a wife who makes my mom suffer. No matter how much I tried to have a rational conversation, my husband just couldn't stay calm. And to say he didn't care about our kids, I've been desperately trying to make him believe me. But it's been hours of getting nowhere. Then there's nothing else to be done. After 10 years together, thinking this, I quietly responded to his demand for divorce. All right, divorce it is. Kicked out by my husband, I left the house with our child. Make sure you file the divorce papers. Conveniently, he had already prepared the divorce papers, as if he knew this would happen. I never thought I'd have to sign something like this, but now there was no other choice. I left the house, went straight to the office to file the papers, and decided to stay at my parents' house for now. My child was shocked by the sudden turn of events, but all I could do was reassure them with empty words, "It's going to be okay." Then, after settling down in a new place with my child, I got a call from my ex-husband, Mark. Something weird is happening. Out of the blue, Mark started talking as if we were still married. "What do you want with me, a stranger?" Now, I know we're strangers. You call me suddenly. Don't even ask about your child, and say something weird is happening. You sound much weirder, you know. Well, here's the thing. I've been sending the money to my mom myself, but she says it's not being transferred. Maybe you're not transferring it. That's impossible. I did it myself. I don't know about that. Maybe you're doing it unconsciously, or perhaps you only dreamed you did it. Don't compare me with you. Then don't call me. I'm not free to deal with this. You're working as usual. So, you're free. How much more will he belittle me? He must think I'm just sitting around doing nothing. My bank statement shows I sent the money. The money's been withdrawn, but my mom says she didn't receive it. What do you think that means? Maybe you sent it to the wrong person. Then where did I send it? I don't know. Maybe you're giving it to some other woman. That's ridiculous to me. It's ridiculous to even have this conversation, but Mark doesn't seem to think so. Anyway, I have nothing to do with it. Wait, that's too cold. You can't just cut ties so easily. I'm not cold. The moment you decided on divorce, you were out of my life. How can you cut ties so easily? A woman doesn't look back. What's the use of dwelling on the past? On you, it's a waste. I'm in trouble here, not my problem. Can't you at least listen to me? How utterly self-centered. All right then, start from the beginning. Tell me what's happening and what's going on. Well, it was the day I said I wanted a divorce, remember? I went to check on Mom at her house, right? I asked her why she was doing piecework even though I send her $1,000 every month. She said she hadn't received any transfers, so she had to do piecework to get by. Now I get it. That's why you were so angry, and you thought I was pocketing the money. Yeah, that's right. But even when you transferred it yourself, it didn't get there. Yeah, that's what's happening. So doesn't that mean it wasn't me? Well, I don't know about that. When you were in charge, maybe you were pocketing the money. That's awful. If that's what you think, then I'll go to your family's house myself. What are you going to do there? Maybe I'll find out something if I go. Yeah, maybe. So we ended up going to my husband's family house together for the first time in a while. When we got there, his sister was there. Oh, why are you here, Selena? I came back because I'm worried about Mom. What about your husband? We're divorced, just like Mark. Oh, so you divorced and came back to your family home? Yes, I did. When did you come back? 6 months ago. 6 months? Never mind that. Mom, is it true that you didn't receive the money I sent? It's true. It doesn't change the fact that the money wasn't received, whether both of you are here or not. But did you print out your account record in your bank book lately? Yes, I did. Just 2 days ago. Can I see the bank book? Sure, you can't show that. Why would you show a bank book to someone else? You're a stranger now. Why would you think she'd show you something so important? Are you out of your mind? But we can't know if the money really wasn't deposited unless we check. You don't need to see it. Then I'll look. I'm her son. It shouldn't matter. Fine, look. There's hardly anything in there anyway. My mother-in-law said this and then fetched the bank book from a drawer in the next room. But when we looked at the bank book, there were deposits and withdrawals. Look, Mark, there's a deposit from you here, and it was withdrawn the next day. That's quite punctual. Before this, even if you deposited it, it wasn't withdrawn immediately. I couldn't go to the bank much because of my back pain. I would wait until it was absolutely necessary, but since Selena came back, she's been going to the bank for me, which has been a big help. Ever since Selena returned, she's been the one going to the bank. The money was always withdrawn the next day, according to the bank book. Mark and I instinctively looked at her. What? I don't know anything about this, she said desperately. But from what we see here, it looks like you withdrew it, Selena. Mom doesn't go to the bank, and maybe someone else has Mom's card and is withdrawing the money every month. I don't have a card. I'm afraid of losing it, so I never made one, she replied anxiously. Tell the truth, Selena, Mark urged. All right, it was me. Mom told me to withdraw the $1,000 she was getting each month. I saw it was being deposited every month, so I thought borrowing a little bit would be okay. If you're borrowing it, are you planning to pay it back? I interjected. I intend to pay it back. I just don't have the money for it right now, she confessed. Why would you do such a thing? Mark questioned. I really needed the money. I only borrowed it because I had to. Besides, Mom's managing to get by. Isn't that fine? Selena justified. Were you that desperate for money? His mother softened her tone and asked. Then Selena completely changed her tone from her previous assertiveness, now playing the role of a pitiful victim. If that's the case, it can't be helped. Mark was kind enough to send the money. But this is an unavoidable situation. Yeah, if sister was in trouble, it's the family's job to help after all, Mark reasoned. Despite his rage and accusations towards me, Mark forgave his sister as if nothing had happened. Hey, I was called a thief over this, and now you're just going to let it go because it's your sister. It can't be helped. She said she's in trouble. That's fine for your money. But don't you have something to say to me? I challenged. Not really. No, not even an apology after all the horrible things you said to me. Why should I apologize? I don't see any need to. I was hurt by what you said, Mark defended. Such a fragile mental state, I muttered to myself. Anyway, it's not like I did anything wrong, right? Selena was having a hard time, so this happened. It's not Mark's fault. He doesn't need to apologize, his mother supported. Isn't this just like being completely surrounded by enemies? Even if I speak the truth, this place is hostile territory. There's no doubt that anything I say will be met with opposition. Even though a quick look at the bank book would have clarified everything, I had to travel all this way just to be treated like this. Fine, if cutting ties with you costs me this much, it's a small price to pay. I'm leaving. Drive me to the station, I demanded. Why do I have to take you? We're divorced, remember? I don't have to do anything for you, a stranger, Mark retorted. Because I came all this way for you. You asked me for help, I argued. Did I? I don't remember asking you to come. I just wanted some advice. You came here on your own. You can leave on your own too. Mark snapped. That's right. You're not a couple anymore. Why should he take you? It makes sense for a husband, but not for a stranger, his mother added. What a group. No thank you or sorry for solving the issue. After spending 10 years with such a man, it felt like such a waste of time. Fine, I'll take a taxi. I don't need you, I declared, frustrated. I called the taxi and somehow managed to get home. As I arrived home, tears of frustration streamed down my face, and I swore never to listen to that man again. However, after a while, my husband called me. Maybe he had changed his mind and was about to apologize for what happened. Perhaps he'd explain that he had to act that way in front of his sister and mother. But my expectations were shattered. Can you lend me some money? He asked abruptly. Shouldn't you say something to me first? Oh, long time no see, I replied. That's not what I mean. You're being troublesome, you know. It's not normal to ask for money without even apologizing first. That's not true. We were a married couple after all. You could say we were a united fate. That's not the case anymore. The day we split up, our united fate dissolved. I still think we're a united fate, though. He keeps saying whatever he wants. So lend me some money, will you? Why? The truth is, I found out Selena has a huge debt. Wait, it's been quite a while since that day. Didn't you ask her what she spent the money on? I couldn't ask her that. It would have been too pitiful. Money is a delicate subject. Maybe her ex-husband had something to do with it. Or there might be some other reason. Sure, there must be some reason. But you should have asked about it for the future, right? I trusted her because we're family, and yet there was no trust for me at all. Well, I've known Selena way longer than I've known you. Yeah, since we were born. That's why I trusted her. I thought everything would be fine, but in the end, it wasn't fine. So what happened? It turns out she had a huge debt, and the $1,000 a month wasn't enough. How much does she need then? She wants to repay it all at once. It's true that paying it off in one go would save on interest, but I don't have that kind of savings. So why did you contact me? Because you said you had a good amount of savings when we were in the car going to your parents' house. I remember. I was insulted by him, saying I must be struggling without money since our divorce, and that I would have stolen the money if he continued to ask me to make the transfers. Angered by his belittling words and the assumption that I couldn't survive on a part-time job, I ended up revealing that I was trading stocks and making a good profit. But would that lead to an ex-wife being asked for a loan? Selena says she's in debt for $30 million. $30 million? Yes, so please lend me the money. It's okay, right? First, why does she have such a huge debt? I was curious too, so I asked her. It turns out most of it was from shopping, and it's all brand items. She just can't control her desire when she sees them and ends up buying things. She put everything on revolving credit, so the interest adds up, and she keeps buying more every month. Before she knew it, her debt reached $30 million. She's really careless. Mark, laughing off his carelessness, is quite careless himself. She didn't understand how revolving credit works. She thought she could just pay a set amount each month, and eventually it would be paid off. I guess I can understand that feeling. I can't understand it at all. How could she take such a risk? And wasn't this the reason for her divorce? Now she finally realized the interest is piling up, and it's becoming a serious problem, so she came crying to me, but I don't have that kind of money. I told her I couldn't give more than $1,000 a month. Then she suggested borrowing from you. What? Why me? You said we were strangers, and you didn't even need to drive me to the station. That's all in the past. The past should be washed away like water under the bridge. What a selfish and convenient way of thinking. Would anyone accept that? So you could afford to lend it, right? Well, yes. I do have that much in savings. Then lend it to me. I just made a lot of money with stocks recently, so you win some, you lose some with stocks, right? Yeah, that makes sense. But didn't you say stocks were like gambling? Isn't it gambling? You always ridiculed me for playing the stock market, calling it a gamble. Right, did I? When you wanted a divorce, you hurried to separate because you said having a wife who gambles on stocks would lead to trouble. I said that when I didn't know how much you had saved. So that's why you asked me how much I had. That time you ridiculed me, but then I mentioned I had savings. Well, yeah, I didn't expect you to have that much, but I'm glad. I inquired, but even at that stage, you still dismissed it as gambling. Well, yeah, but let's not worry about it. I was foolish. All right, that's not all right. You are really cruel, and now you want money I saved for our child. You're worrying too much. Our child won't need that money for a long time. It's silly to start saving from now. Money rots if you don't use it. Money rots. I've never heard of money rotting. Think of this as an investment. It's like investing in me. Why would I invest in you? Just do it. Lending me the money would be the smartest move, right? Look, if I lend you money, it won't come back, right? You're still sending $1,000 a month to your mom. Where will you find the money to pay me back? All right, I'll pay back $11,000 a month. Are you crazy? How many years do you think it will take to repay it that way? Don't say that. I really regret it. Regret? Yeah, if we hadn't split up, I wouldn't have to beg you for money now. I have to ask, isn't that unjust? So you're just after my money? No, it's not like that. We don't have love, but we can rely on each other. It feels like I'm only being relied upon. You're so rigid. Thinking like that won't make you happy. We could even remarry. I didn't mind our marriage that much. Wow, I do mind. I don't want to be with someone who can't apologize. Fine, I apologize. Sorry. Is that good enough? What are you apologizing for? Explain in 400 characters or less what you did wrong. I just apologized because you said so. Pathetic. Don't ever call me again. Why? I apologized? So will you remarry me or help me? My sister is suffering. Shut up. Go to hell. Saying so, I forcefully ended the call and blocked his number. Later, I heard from mutual friends that Mark, despite saying it was impossible, couldn't refuse Selena. Being not only constantly nagged by Selena, but also persuaded by his mother to help. Consequently, he ended up borrowing money from a consumer finance company to repay her debt in full. Everything was settled, assuming Selena would work and gradually repay the debt. They thought so. However, far from working, she resumed her shopping habits. Despite having suffered before, she again made purchases on revolving credit. This burden eventually fell directly upon Mark to handle. When they confronted her about why things turned out this way, she reportedly said, "I never intended to buy anything." By the time I realized it, I had already processed the credit. Mark and his mother, naively believing Selena's words, just accepted it, saying she must be sick. They neither devised any solutions nor took her to a hospital, despite thinking she is ill. While saying this, Selena, wearing expensive clothes and jewelry, is reportedly laughing over tea with friends, saying, "Really, Mark is so easy to manipulate." Eventually, they couldn't escape the debt and had to sell their family home. Now Mark, his mother, and Selena ended up living together, but they couldn't afford the rent for the apartment they used to live in. So the three of them moved. Apparently, their life is quite difficult now. It seems only Selena is enjoying it, but neither Mark nor his mother realized this. On the other hand, I continue to profit from the stock market and now live a comfortable life in a spacious apartment with my child.
I recently found out that my husband Terry purchased the high-rise condominium right across from the train station. Out of nowhere, he brought up this unexpected topic. I knew he had been considering it, but I had no idea he'd actually gone through with it. The view from the condo is breathtaking, and everything inside is spotless. But here's where it gets strange. I was completely in the dark about it. Can you believe he secretly bought a luxury condo while I was away visiting my parents? I couldn't wrap my head around it. Where did he even get the money? Then, as if it was nothing, Terry casually mentioned that he used the money from selling our previous place to make the down payment. He went on to tell me that he'd be moving in with his parents, without me. I stood there, stunned, as he calmly asked me to leave. I was so taken aback that I couldn't even respond. My name is Carol, and I'm 31, currently 8 months pregnant. Each day, I get more excited about the arrival of our baby, though I'm nervous about giving birth for the first time. My husband Terry is 2 years older than me at 33. He works at a well-known company and we've been married for 4 years. After facing challenges with conception, I was overjoyed when we finally got pregnant. But now, the shock about the condo has left me unsure of what's happening. To calm my nerves, I've been spending more time at my in-laws' house. On one visit, Terry's sister-in-law, Madison, asked, "Carol, you're about to become a mom soon. How do you feel about it?" "To be honest, it doesn't feel quite real yet," I told her. Madison, who's married to Terry's older brother, is one of the reasons I enjoy visiting. While I don't interact much with my brother-in-law, Madison and I have grown close. She's a housewife like me and lives with my in-laws. 2 years ago, my mother-in-law's mobility started to decline, and Madison stepped in to care for her since she has experience as a caregiver. My mother-in-law mainly uses a cane to get around and does fine on her own most of the time, but Madison still helps out a lot. I've been so impressed by how easily she took on that responsibility without hesitation. Madison and her husband have a 4-year-old daughter, and watching her as a mother has eased some of my anxieties about pregnancy and childbirth. I often find myself looking to her for advice as my due date approaches. With just a month left until my baby is due, I decided to visit my parents to prepare for the birth. Despite the heaviness in my belly, I enjoyed shopping for baby clothes and daydreaming about our future. It was refreshing to spend time at my parents' house after so long. But then, 3 days past my due date, the contractions began. I tried reaching out to my husband, but he was completely unreachable. No calls, no texts, nothing. At first, I was worried that he might be caught up at work or in some sort of trouble. But as my labor pains grew stronger, I didn't have time to wonder where he was. The only thing on my mind was bringing our baby into the world. Eventually, I gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. The moment I held her in my arms, the indescribable joy I felt washed over me, making everything else seem distant. But the fact remained, my husband, who had promised to be by my side, missed the birth. Exhausted from the delivery, I didn't have the energy to confront him right away. Instead, I sent him a brief text announcing the arrival of our daughter and then drifted into a deep sleep. When I woke up, I heard someone calling my name. "Are you still asleep?" "Terry, is it morning already?" I mumbled, opening my eyes to find my husband and his parents standing there. Despite my clear requests for privacy after the birth, here they were. "Why didn't you come yesterday?" I asked, my frustration evident. He shrugged off the question, avoiding a direct answer, and casually replied, "It couldn't be helped." His tone was light, as if his absence and the sudden appearance of his parents were trivial matters. I was left grappling with a whirlwind of emotions, from the pure joy of holding my newborn daughter to the bitter disappointment in my husband. When I needed him the most, he chose to go out for sushi with his parents. He justified it by saying it was a prior commitment, and afterward, he didn't come to the hospital because he'd had a few drinks and thought he'd be more of a nuisance than a help. The knowledge that he had been enjoying a meal while I was going through labor was disheartening. And now, here he was, oblivious to my hurt, asking casually, "So, where's our baby?" I told him our baby was in the nursery, a healthy baby girl. Upon hearing this, my mother-in-law grimaced and muttered, "A girl? What a useless wife," shocking me with her harsh words. My father-in-law joined in, shaking his head in disappointment, calling both Madison and me pathetic. I was stunned. Instead of receiving any gratitude for enduring childbirth, I was met with criticism. Even Terry wasn't pleased. "Damn it, I knew it was a girl, but I was hoping for a boy," he said, echoing his parents' obvious disappointment. Their frustration over not having a grandson was palpable, especially since Madison's first child had also been a girl. But to me, none of that mattered. Our daughter was precious no matter her gender. As I sat there, overwhelmed and hurt, Terry chose to side with his parents, deepening my dismay. I was seething inside, but the physical and emotional exhaustion from childbirth left me too drained to confront them. Thankfully, a nurse overheard our conversation and intervened, asking them to leave. At last, I had some much-needed peace. Since then, Terry hadn't visited us again at the hospital. When it came time for our discharge, I didn't even bother calling him. Instead, I asked my parents to pick us up and take us to their home. The thought of returning to a house filled with tension and disappointment was unbearable. As I sat at my parents' place, holding my baby, I couldn't help but reflect on the changes in Terry. He used to be so caring when we first got married. I suspected that his transformation had something to do with the significant mistake he made at work 2 years ago, a mistake that caused his company a major financial loss. Although his colleagues managed to soften the blow, sparing him direct consequences, his career took a serious hit. No matter how hard he worked afterward, he couldn't regain his previous standing. Since then, I noticed Terry becoming more detached and colder, both at work and at home. Adding insult to injury, one of his juniors at the company, who had once been less competent than him, was now his boss. This reversal of roles seemed to weigh heavily on him, fueling his irritability and distance. Even as I grew more dissatisfied with his behavior, I had hoped that the birth of our baby might inspire a change in him. But as the days passed and he didn't even try, my worry for our family's future deepened. Out of the blue, Terry finally called me. "Hey, when are you coming back? You've been at your parents' for nearly a month since the baby was born," he said, his tone flat. I wasn't ready to return home, not with everything unresolved, but I found myself replying, "Sorry. I'm coming home soon. It's time to start fresh and pull it together for our daughter," I said, trying to focus on what mattered. I asked Terry if he could help me bring back the baby items. His response left me speechless. "You don't have to bring all that stuff back. I have something else to talk about. Maybe I should have told you over the phone," he said, his tone unsettling. Confused, I pressed him for clarity. That's when he dropped another bombshell. "I bought a high-rise condo right in front of the station." I was stunned. "What do you mean? Why are you bringing this up now?" He rambled on about the condo's spectacular view and how clean and modern it was, but my mind was stuck on the fact that he had moved out of our apartment while I was away. "Where did the money come from? You can't afford a place like that on your salary," I exclaimed, panic rising. Casually, as if it was nothing, he replied, "I made the down payment by selling our house." The ground beneath me seemed to disappear. "What? You sold our house? Where are your parents living now?" I asked, my voice shaking. His excitement was apparent. "Daddy and Mommy are living with me in the condo. I'm going to live with them now, in this great new place, so I don't need a parasite like you around." I was floored. He was moving in with his parents, without my knowledge or consent, and now he was effectively kicking me out. I couldn't find the words to respond. He started referring to his parents in childish terms, boasting about their new life together in the condo. Adding insult to injury, he sneered, "You're cocky for just a housewife. You're useless without my salary. Besides, you've done nothing but laze around these days." His words hit like daggers. I stood there, reeling, questioning not only his love but how I had ended up married to someone so heartless. During my pregnancy, when I struggled with severe morning sickness and preparations for our child, he'd shown no sympathy. After the baby was born, he had coldly remarked that I was useless for having a girl. Worse still, he claimed his parents thought it would be better for him to be with a younger woman who could give him a son. He continued, explaining that his parents no longer wanted to live with my brother and his wife, indicating there was already family tension. As if that wasn't enough, he told me he had packed all my belongings and stored them in a unit, instructing me to collect them soon. The conversation turned even more brutal when he said, without emotion, "I've sent you divorce papers. I expect you to file them promptly." Then, without waiting for any response, he hung up. I sat there, stunned, the phone still in my hand. How had it come to this? I was married to a man who had turned into someone unrecognizable, someone cold and cruel. I felt regret, but more than that, I was left questioning everything I thought I knew. I knew I had to pull myself together for the sake of our daughter. After taking time to reflect, I resolved to sever ties with him and start fresh. I wasn't going to let him control my life anymore. Divorce? Bring it on. I was determined to show him he'd regret this more than I ever would. When I explained the situation to my parents, they were furious. They immediately supported me in taking legal action. As soon as I received the divorce papers, I signed and filed them. Half a month later, my husband unexpectedly showed up at my parents' house, fuming. He stormed in, slamming his bank book on the table. "What's this? Why is there a huge withdrawal from my account?" he demanded angrily. I remained calm and met his gaze. "Haven't you heard of the division of property? That's what this is. The account is in my name, and I'm not giving you a cent." His eyes widened in shock. "You couldn't have made that much money," he snapped. "Remember, your salary dropped because of your mistake at work. And now you think you can claim this money." I didn't flinch. "I've been working from home, and I've managed to match your salary. And since you're the one who wanted a divorce, we're dividing the assets. He stared at me, dumbfounded. You've got to be kidding. That's when my father, who had been silently observing, finally spoke. If you want to dispute this, we'll settle it in court. How dare you treat my daughter this way? The room was tense. This had escalated beyond personal grievances. It was now a matter of legal and financial justice. I was ready to fight for what was rightfully mine and to protect my daughter's future. I wasn't backing down. I deeply regret that my daughter had to experience such turmoil because of Terry. One day, when he tried to confront us again, my father, who is a police officer, gave him a stern look that scared him off. Terry quickly left, and that was the moment I finally severed ties with him for good. We also resolved the division of assets. Since then, I've been living with my parents, focusing on raising my daughter. Parenting has become more familiar, and my daughter's adorable nature makes each day joyful. Life has been good, filled with the kind of happiness only a child can bring. A few months into our new life, I started receiving persistent calls from an unknown number. At first, I ignored them, thinking they might be work-related, but the caller wouldn't give up. Eventually, I answered, and to my surprise, it was Terry. "Hello, Carol," he said hesitantly. "What do you want?" I asked, skipping the small talk. "I'm having trouble paying the mortgage for the condo, and I might get kicked out soon," he confessed. "Oh, so you're short on cash?" I replied without much sympathy. "Yes, I've used up all my savings. Dad injured his back and had to quit his job, and Mom's been spending recklessly, bragging to her friends about living in the condo," he explained, his voice filled with desperation. I wasn't surprised. Terry had never been good with managing money, and without his father's income and his mother's lavish spending, it was no shock he couldn't keep up with the condo's expenses. "My bank account is empty, and I've been told I need to leave if I can't pay by next week. Please, Carol, come back. We loved each other once," he pleaded. I let out a brief laugh before responding calmly, "Give me a break. You just want to use me when it's convenient for you. You think I'll come back, not for love, but for my salary and to do all the housework, right?" There was a pause. "Also, remember when you called me a parasite? Wouldn't that just be in the way now?" He tried to backtrack, but it was too late. I just chose the wrong words back then. I pressed on, asking, "What about Madison and your brother? Are they still living with your parents?" He sighed. "They moved out and are living on their own now. They had a big argument with our parents. My brother wanted Dad to be more sensible, but that only made things worse." Terry's situation seemed dire, but it was a result of his own choices, a tangled mess of financial and familial errors. It was clear he was looking for an easy way out by trying to pull me back into his life. However, I had moved on, focused on building a healthier future for myself and my daughter, free from the chaos of my past with him. Then I heard that my brother-in-law had finally had enough. He stormed out after telling their parents he'd cut ties with them if they continued to disrespect his wife, Madison. It was heartening to know he stood up for her. He seemed like a decent guy. As for Terry, his plea for me to return was met with disbelief. "Come back to you? Are you serious? I'm already overwhelmed just taking care of our daughter. I don't have the energy to deal with people like you." I couldn't help but comment on how odd it was for him to still call his parents Daddy and Mommy. It didn't seem appropriate for someone his age. He tried to backtrack, suggesting I bring our daughter over to live with them. "Weren't you planning to live with her when you first asked me to come back?" I questioned, catching him off guard. "I would never let my daughter live with such a despicable father. Don't ever call me again. If you show up, I'll have my dad arrest you," I warned. His response was a feeble sound, likely recalling my father's intimidating presence. I hung up and blocked his number. Not long after, he tried to reach me with a new number, but I changed mine to cut him off completely. Later, I reconnected with Madison, who reached out to apologize for her silence. She explained that they had moved to the countryside and struggled to set up the internet. Madison and her family now lived in a tranquil rural area and invited me over. When I visited for the first time, I was charmed by the serene surroundings, an ideal place for a child to grow up. During my visit, my brother-in-law shared that Terry and his parents had been evicted from their condo due to unpaid debts and were now struggling financially, a stark contrast to their previous lifestyle. It felt a bit like poetic justice. Meanwhile, I had been working from home and living comfortably at my parents' house. The flexibility of my job allowed me to work from anywhere, so I spent a few relaxing days at Madison's home. I considered the possibility of moving closer to her in the future, hopeful for what lay ahead for my daughter and me. Reflecting on the whole ordeal, buying a high-rise condo on a whim while your wife is pregnant seems absurd, unless you're quite wealthy. It's strange to take such a risk on a normal income. In any case, I felt relieved to be rid of such an unsavory husband. I hope to continue enjoying my peaceful life, possibly relocating near Madison and her family, where everyone got along and fostered a happy environment for my daughter.
Well, well, it appears that our less educated daughter-in-law, the unremarkable Plain Jane, is about to grace us with her singing. Come on, step onto the stage, you ugly duckling, my mother-in-law sneered. It was my sister-in-law's wedding reception, and I was coerced into performing a solo, as was customary whenever my mother-in-law found an opportunity to belittle me. Her audacity to humiliate me, even on such a joyous occasion as my sister-in-law's wedding, was beyond my comprehension. What's taking so long? Hurried up? She's getting impatient. Her voice hardened. Okay then. I will. Excuse me. I stood up from my seat and slowly made my way towards the stage. I'm Erica, 33 years old, living with my 4-year-old daughter Janice and my husband Paul, who's the same age as me. We're in our 8th year of marriage. Orphaned as a child, I was raised by my grandparents but chose to be independent, dropping out of high school to work at a local factory. Paul and I reconnected at a high school reunion when we were 21, hit it off, and started dating. 3 years after Paul graduated from university, we got married. Since then, I've been supporting him, managing our household chores, and raising our daughter while working part-time. Mom, teach me how to sing, Janice has been asking me recently. Neither Paul nor I had any intention of forcing music onto her, but I have a background in music, having been the president of the choir club in high school. I still love singing and even take voice training lessons as a hobby. Janice developed an interest in music naturally, and I hope that one day we can perform together with Paul's music. Returning home 3 days later, my mother-in-law called, resuming her habit of belittling me since she discovered I dropped out of high school. She often showered me with insults, criticizing my abilities and family background. She wasn't my favorite person. Hello, is Janice there right now? My mother-in-law asked. I'm sorry, she's at voice training right now. She's not home, I replied, realizing I had let something slip, but it was too late. Why didn't you tell me before letting her attend such things? You really don't think things through. I'll teach her, my mother-in-law insisted. Despite her accomplished musical background, she tended to take a condescending tone when it came to music and education. She doted on our daughter but might inadvertently push her away if she followed the same strict teaching approach she used on Paul and his sister in the past. Mother-in-law, I appreciate your offer, but I want Janice to have her freedom in this. Even if you say that, it's really up to Janice whether she wants to continue or not. I can't force her to quit. I'm sure it would be much better if I taught her. My mother-in-law abruptly ended the call. 3 months passed, and I'd almost forgotten about the incident when my mother-in-law decided to visit our home. It's been a while, hasn't it? Oh, how's Janice been doing? She inquired, likely happy to see her granddaughter after such a long time. As soon as she stepped into our home, she immediately scooped Janice into her arms, barely greeting us. It just so happened that Janice had the day off from her voice training class, and the whole family was at home. Granny, I've become good at singing, Janice exclaimed, boasting to her grandmother. Really? Could you sing something for me then? My mother-in-law asked. I intervened, worried about what my mother-in-law might say to Janice. How about we eat first before we hear her sing? It's lunchtime after all, I suggested. Don't interrupt when she's about to sing for me. My mother-in-law dismissed my suggestion. "I'm sorry, Janice dear. Can you sing for me?" my mother-in-law asked. Hearing her request, Janice began to sing. From the perspective of a mother-in-law who graduated as the valedictorian of a music conservatory, my daughter's singing must have sounded rather clumsy. I had a sinking feeling inside me, worried that my daughter might receive some snide remarks from her. However, my mother-in-law applauded and praised my daughter, saying, "You did well. You've practiced a lot." Far from making any sarcastic comments, she thanked her grandmother, seeming happy to be praised. I sighed in relief, thinking that even my strict mother-in-law wouldn't make snide remarks to her granddaughter. I thought Mom might say something. I was a little worried. Paul whispered to me with a look of relief on his face. Nothing particular happened after that, but as the evening came, I realized that Janice had fallen asleep. "Excuse me, mother-in-law. Since Janice fell asleep, I'm going to take her to her room," I announced, picking up Janice and carrying her to her bedroom. After putting my daughter to bed, I returned to the living room. As soon as I re-entered, my mother-in-law said to me, "Didn't you think that Janice's singing today was terrible, Erica? It's a waste of money to let her go to a class that can only teach her to that level. I'll teach her myself." I confronted Paul as anger welled up within me. Wait a minute, isn't that a bit too selfish? What can we do when it comes to music? She's much better than me, and it's a fact that I got better by being taught by her, Paul reasoned. About 5 minutes of silence followed, and it was Paul who gave in and said, "All right, Mom, go ahead and teach Janice to sing for a while." Hearing those unbelievable words from Paul's mouth, my mind went blank. Is this some kind of joke? Won't they care how Janice feels? After all, she has been so happy to be interested in music. What if Janice hates music because she's taught so strictly by her grandmother? I was so angry that I felt like waking up Janice right at that moment and leaving the house with her. So I guess it means Janice is quitting the voice training class, as I said, right? My mother-in-law, with a triumphant look on her face, asked Paul and me. "All right, but remember, this is not a music conservatory, so please absolutely do not do anything that Janice would dislike." "I know, but you know I'm not uneducated like you," I retorted, stating what I had to say, knowing she'd never back off, and I let her go home for the day. That night, my husband apologized for his mother's behavior, but I did not even want to see his face. I ignored him and went to bed. The next morning, I told my daughter Janice, "From today, instead of going to the voice training class, let's have Grandma teach you to sing here at home, all right?" When she heard it, she looked very sad but said nothing and just nodded. I apologized, seeing her like that. Then, come noon, my mother-in-law arrived at our home. "Janice, starting today, Grandma is going to teach you to sing even better," she said to my daughter with a smile. No sooner had the lesson started than my mother-in-law's teaching style became more and more strict. Within an hour, she criticized Janice harshly, demanding perfection. "You're wrong. You're making the same mistake in the same place. Do it again." I knew it would turn out like this. "Mother-in-law, this isn't what we agreed to, is it? Could you be a bit gentler?" "What are you talking about? I'm being gentle. Don't interfere. Why don't you quietly do some housework that you can hardly handle?" 4 hours passed, and at last, my mother-in-law's lesson ended. "Well, see you tomorrow. Remember to practice what we did today." She left, seemingly pleased with herself. If I'm going to get yelled at this much, I don't want to sing anymore. Seated in her chair, Janice said to me. I harbored an intense hatred for my mother-in-law, taking away what my daughter enjoyed and only caring about her own satisfaction. This cannot go on. I won't let my mother-in-law have her way. Her singing lessons continued in the days that followed. However, after about a week, Janice told me, "I don't want Grandma to teach me anymore. I don't want to sing." Given my mother-in-law's way of teaching, I thought it couldn't be helped. You don't have to force yourself. If you want to quit, that's okay too. So you don't want to go back to the voice training class. It was something she had started because she wanted to, and I, for my part, wanted her to continue. So I asked her that. If it's that class. It seemed that Janice hadn't come to hate singing itself. It appeared that the harsh words from her grandmother and the lack of praise, even when she felt she did well, were making it unenjoyable for her. Why don't you go back to your voice training lessons and give it another shot? I asked Janice, and as if she hadn't been upset moments before, she perked up and nodded enthusiastically. So I'm sorry to say this to you, grandmother, but from tomorrow, Janice will be returning to her original voice training classes. The next day arrived. I relayed Janice's feelings to her grandmother over the phone. How can she whine about giving up after just a week? Isn't it your fault for raising such a weak-minded child? My mother-in-law exclaimed. I retorted, well, it might be, but even though you graduated top of your class from a prestigious music college, it seems that's the only way you know how to teach. Janice told me that she preferred her voice training teacher. Fussing and fuming, my mother-in-law continued, but I ignored her and hung up. Whether she was top of her class or not, it was quite satisfying that her own teaching method had led to her being disliked by her granddaughter, who preferred her voice training teacher. After that, the visits from the grandmother ceased. I spoken to your mother and told her it was okay if she didn't come to teach anymore. Janice said she didn't want it anymore either. I also feel like I've done something unforgivable to Janice. Back in the day, my mother was very strict with me about music, so I couldn't say anything. But I thought she wouldn't be so harsh on her granddaughter. I'm really sorry, I confessed to my husband Paul that night. When I relayed this to him, he seemed deeply regretful and apologized. I was so angry when Paul suggested quitting Janice's voice training class and having the grandmother teach her. I almost felt like punching him, but fortunately, Janice didn't come to hate music, so I decided to forgive him. 2 weeks later, Paul said, my sister is getting married in a month, and she asks us to perform. I had never performed at someone else's wedding before. What kind of performance is she expecting? I was planning to bring a few people from my band and do a small concert, but my sister really wants you and my mother to sing as well. Hearing that the grandmother would also be performing, I reluctantly accepted Paul's suggestion. So, does that mean I'll be singing with your mother? Well, yeah, that's how it seems. Singing with my mother-in-law of all people, I wondered if it would be all right. But if I happened to sing better than her at this performance, I wondered what she'll say. I started practicing the very next day, but there was no sign of my mother-in-law practicing at all. Mother, aren't you going to practice? I'm fine. I'm much better than you, even without practicing. After all, practice is something that people like you, who are not very good, need to do. I tried asking because I was curious, but the only response from my mother-in-law was sarcasm. I decided it was a waste of time to engage with her and focused on my own preparations. After we decided what song to perform, I also increased the frequency of my voice training lessons. I was sick of being ridiculed by my mother-in-law, and above all, I was anxious about performing in public after such a long time without proper training. On the day of my sister-in-law's wedding, the ceremony went smoothly, and the time for the entertainment had finally come. First, my husband Paul took the stage and began to play his music. As expected, given he plays regularly, he was confident and exuded an elegant aura. I was utterly mesmerized by Paul's performance. I'm not feeling well today. Could you sing on your own? Then, out of the blue, my mother-in-law told me to sing solo. What? That's so sudden. It's not fair. Well, there's nothing we can do about it. Or what? Are you too embarrassed to sing in front of others because you're uneducated and ugly? She said this without a hint of remorse. Okay, I know it. She's doing this on purpose. I thought and decided to retort. Being uneducated and ugly. I've practiced hard, so I won't be embarrassed singing in front of others. I asked you several times if you needed to practice, but you showed no signs of doing so. Could it be that you're actually a terrible singer? That's not true. My mother-in-law raised her voice in response to my question. The people around us began to stir, wondering what was going on. Sorry. It's nothing. I got up from my seat, apologized to those around me, and then pressed my mother-in-law further. Graduating as valedictorian from the music college, you sure talk big about teaching others, huh? Are you running away because you're embarrassed to sing with me since I'm better? I whispered this in her ear. What did you say? There's no way that's true. If I sing with a low-educated, ugly person like you, it would only throw me off. Didn't your parents teach you that you and your parents are truly incompetent? She disparaged me as being uneducated and ugly and even insulted my parents in front of everyone. Embarrassed and angry, I wanted to leave right at that moment, but if I ran away now, it would just make her happy. What are you doing just sitting there? Hurry up and go. Okay, then I will. Excuse me. Just as Paul's performance ended, I took his place on stage. I was supposed to sing with my mother-in-law, but due to her not feeling well, I would be singing solo. Instead of the song I was supposed to sing with her, I chose an opera song I used to sing a lot when I was competitive, an aria from The Marriage of Figaro. And so, I began to sing. At that moment, perhaps due to the vocal training I had done, my condition was excellent, and I was able to produce the most beautiful vibrato I'd ever achieved. It was amazing. The audience was mesmerized by my singing, saying things like, "Wow, her voice is incredible," and "Is she a professional?" When I finished singing my song without any hitches, the audience gave me a standing ovation, showering me with thunderous applause. Congrats on your wedding, sister-in-law. You know, I used to be the choir leader in high school. It's been a few years since I last sang in front of an audience, so I was a bit nervous. How did I do? Thanks so much for listening. After making this statement, I returned to my seat, and my daughter, all starry-eyed, pleaded, "Mom, your voice was so beautiful. Can you teach me next time?" Witnessing this, my mother-in-law, with her jealousy on full display, said in a huff, Anyone can sing like that. Don't get ahead of yourself," continuing to belittle my singing. Just as I thought the entertainment segment was over, my sister-in-law unexpectedly said, "Mother-in-law, and you should sing too." Words that I didn't expect came out from my sister-in-law. My mother-in-law was taken aback and looked at her daughter in confusion, asking me, "I've never heard you sing, Mom, and since you taught me so much about music when I was young, I'd really love to hear you sing," my sister-in-law expressed with pure honesty. The attendees chimed in, "Mother-in-law, you should definitely sing." Words had gotten around that my mother-in-law was a top graduate from a prestigious music school, and the crowd grew increasingly excited for her performance, creating an atmosphere where she felt she had to sing. Well, with all this, I guess you have to sing now, don't you? I did not hesitate to add, "So, all right. If you insist," she responded, heading to the stage. The moment my mother-in-law took the stage, the energy in the room peaked. But as she began to sing, such murmurs could be heard throughout the crowd. Wait, no way. I might even be a better singer. She must have heard them as well. My mother-in-law's voice did seem off, but even accounting for that, her singing was dreadful. She always criticized others for their singing, but her pitch was all over the place. Honestly, I felt I was still a better singer. The atmosphere grew awkward as her performance ended. Unlike when I sang, the venue was filled with a cold atmosphere, and the applause was sparse. Everyone acted as if they'd seen something they shouldn't have, as if her turn had never happened. Upon returning to our table, my mother-in-law, her face flushed red, shouted at me, "That's why I didn't want to sing. If you had sung properly, my daughter wouldn't have asked me to do this," she said to me with such an angry tone. But I didn't understand why my sister-in-law asked her mother to sing. It seemed to me that she genuinely wanted the wedding to be blessed by the voice of her mother, who had been sternly teaching her about music since her childhood. Do you think so? To me, it seems she genuinely wanted you to sing. I shared my honest thoughts with my mother-in-law. No way. I'm sure she knew I'm bad at singing, and this is her way of embarrassing me. I was utterly astonished at her response. She had always criticized others' music and performances, yet she herself didn't want to sing in public because she's bad at it. She never hesitates to complain about others' music, but she is like, I don't accept complaints, although I'm a bad singer myself. Such a self-centered attitude won't be accepted. My daughter Janice might have her newfound love for music crushed by her grandmother. I could no longer bear my mother-in-law's attitude. So, a person who studied at a prestigious music school and criticizes others' music is just doing so because she can only sing this badly. But mother-in-law, isn't it great? You are able to sing alone without having to sing with a terrible singer like me. I responded to my mother-in-law with a sarcastic tone. How dare you say that? It's your fault that I had to embarrass myself. It's not nice to say that in front of your daughter. I'm sure she's satisfied hearing her mother singing. As I spoke these words, my mother-in-law fell silent. There was a stir amongst those who'd heard what I had said to my mother-in-law. But other than that, the ceremony went on smoothly and ended without any problems. 2 days after the ceremony, my mother-in-law stormed into our house. I just can't let it go. I want you to apologize for what had happened. I was surprised by her sudden visit, but retorted, What exactly am I supposed to apologize for? I wasn't aware that your singing was that bad. Instead, I think you owe us an apology. What do you mean? I have absolutely nothing to apologize for. It's your fault I was forced to sing that song I hated and embarrass myself. No, not to me, to Janice, because of you. Janice almost came to hate the music that she had started to enjoy. Even though you graduated from a prestigious music school, why would you torment a child who has developed an interest in music just because things didn't go your way? Is that what you learned from your music school? I haven't received any musical training from you, yet I was able to sing at the reception and even received applause. How about you, mother-in-law? Shall I give you some singing lessons? I'll teach you thoroughly. My mother-in-law was speechless hearing what I said. If you have nothing else to discuss, please leave. I won't tolerate you interfering with our daughter or my husband's music anymore. Upon hearing this, my mother-in-law left our home without another word. Her shoulders slumped into defeat. I felt a sense of satisfaction from being able to retaliate so fiercely in her area of expertise, music. It was indeed worth continuing my voice training since my youth. Without the voice training, I might not have been able to receive such applause at my sister-in-law's wedding reception. I wonder how my mother-in-law, who has always boasted about graduating top of her class from a prestigious music school, felt being scolded this way by someone like me who only has a high school diploma and was just a choir member. To be honest, I felt a sense of poetic justice towards my mother-in-law. I thought, serves her right. She shouldn't act so haughty anymore. It's been a month since the wedding ceremony of my sister-in-law, and now my mother-in-law occasionally visits our house, but she doesn't complain about my daughter's singing anymore. I actually didn't mind my mother-in-law visiting since she did not say anything about music anymore. My daughter Janice, who has improved a lot in her singing recently, is challenging a slightly difficult song given as an assignment in her class. Mom, this song is hard, but I'll try to sing it beautifully, she declared, practicing enthusiastically. That's great. You do your best. You'll definitely do well. Although I love singing, don't know much about the technical aspects, so I had no idea what was difficult about the song. But seeing my daughter working so hard, that's all I could say. On that day, my mother-in-law, who happened to be visiting our house, observed the interaction between me and Janice and said, Erica, this song is not something you can handle by just doing your best. Janice, listen well. You should do it like this. It was incredibly kind and patient of her, which was unimaginable given how she used to be, to explain until Janice understood. Oh, thank you, Grandma. It's easier to sing now, Janice said as she listened intently to her grandmother's advice, working hard to master her assignment. Erica, I used to look down on everyone doing music without graduating from a music college. But after meeting someone like you who can sing so beautifully without a music degree, I changed my mind. After all, we should enjoy music. Could you teach me to sing next time? My mother-in-law said that looking at Janice singing. I was surprised to hear such a thing all of a sudden, but I'm sure the sarcastic comment I made after my sister-in-law's wedding had its effect. My lessons are tough, you know. I grant this. I replied to my mother-in-law. Oh, I won't do anything horrible anymore. I feel sorry for Paul too, although it's too late now. But if you're going to be tough, Erica, I'm prepared. After hearing that from my mother-in-law, I felt assured that she won't say anything about her music anymore. Although a lot had happened, the tension between my mother-in-law and me eased off, and since then, we've often gone to karaoke together, becoming close enough to sing together. I hope that one day when Janice becomes even better at singing, the four of us, me, Paul, Janice, and my mother-in-law, can have a fun jam session.
Hello everyone, I'm Betty. I want to share a significant chapter of my life that involved intense challenges with my in-laws and my husband while navigating a divorce. I hope my story resonates with those who have faced undue criticism from their in-laws. It all began when I met Kevin, my now estranged husband, on a dating app. I was a 20-year-old college student, and Kevin was 26, employed and stable. Despite our age difference, we fell in love. I've always believed that love isn't bound by age or looks, so Kevin being older never bothered me. However, Kevin was troubled by our age gap. He often questioned why I was with him, suggesting that I could find someone closer to my age who might be a better match. I chose Kevin because I loved him, and for me, age was just a number. Despite my reassurances, Kevin's insecurities persisted. He would say, "There must be another reason, Betty. It's not usual for someone like you to love someone like me. I wish you'd just tell me the real reason." I repeatedly assured him that my feelings were genuine and that I wasn't interested in dating someone my age. I loved him, and that's what mattered to me. Even though I tried my best to prove my affection, Kevin's self-doubt lingered, hinting at deeper self-esteem issues that seemed to have kept him single before we met. Eager to demonstrate my commitment, I made sure never to let Kevin spend excessively on me. While managing my finances as a college student, I wasn't wealthy, but I made thoughtful gifts and handled my expenses independently through part-time jobs. Kevin seemed to appreciate these efforts, but sadly, his insecurities didn't fade. It took 3 years for me to fully understand the origins of Kevin's issues when I met his parents, Samuel and Charlotte. Samuel, Kevin's father, had a dramatic change in fortune after winning the lottery. This newfound wealth brought a sense of superiority. During our first meeting, Samuel bragged about his success, saying, "Not everyone makes it big like me. I was just a hard worker, and look where it got me. Winning the lottery on my first try is rare." Samuel and Charlotte were proud of their wealth and often implied that Kevin, despite his college education, would never reach their level of financial success. Charlotte suggested that Kevin's previous partners were only interested in his money and left him as soon as they were financially better off. They openly doubted Kevin's ability to make good decisions, which infuriated me. It seemed like they painted every woman Kevin dated as a gold digger, and over time, Kevin began to believe this narrative himself. Their insinuation that I was just another gold digger became an embarrassing and hurtful part of their story. Fed up with their baseless assumptions, I stood up for both Kevin and myself. "I'm sorry, but I have to disagree. Kevin has worked hard to establish his career and will achieve even greater success in time." Samuel retorted, "That doesn't change the fact that women only want him for money. The money we have is ours, but Kevin does co-own the house. Eventually it will be his. Every time these girls see our $350,000 house." I felt a surge of frustration. "I swear, they just see dollar signs," I said, unable to hold back. "I can't speak for Kevin's past relationships, but I'm definitely not in this for the money. I love your son, and that's why we're together. I have no interest in your house." Charlotte's response was dismissive. "Don't worry, Betty. Sometimes it's hard to accept that people can be successful and live in nice houses. You live in a small rented apartment with roommates. You might start desiring it after spending time around our house." Their comments were pushing my patience to the limit. I was on the verge of losing my temper. Kevin heard everything but chose not to respond or defend himself, instead steering the conversation elsewhere. His indifference on the way home was unexpected and hurtful. Once we were home, I knew I had to address the issue directly with Kevin. "Kevin, your parents are being unfair and hurtful towards us. Why did you stand up for me?" Kevin sighed, his frustration evident. "What did you expect me to say, Betty? My past isn't exactly encouraging. I've been used before by people who only saw my parents' wealth and made plans for when they would inherit the house. Even if they're wrong about some things, it doesn't mean they're wrong about everything. The words stung. Even if those women were after your money, that doesn't mean I am. It hurts that you stayed silent while your family insulted me. Kevin looked conflicted. You know my family is wealthy now, and maybe they have a point. I'm not accusing you of having bad intentions, but I can see why it might look questionable to others. You don't have parents, and because of that, you might seem more reliant on my inheritance. His words were almost too much to bear. What you're suggesting is absurd. Kevin, I've never pressured you to spend on me. Not having an inheritance doesn't make me a gold digger. But Kevin remained stubborn, unwilling to see my perspective. I love you, and that's what matters, Kevin said, dismissing any need for further discussion. While some might have found comfort in his declaration of love, I couldn't shake the feeling that he still harbored doubts about my intentions. I tried repeatedly to address the issue, even suggesting therapy to help him see things more clearly, but he refused, insisting there was nothing wrong. As time went on, I began to distance myself from his family. We got engaged right after I graduated from college, and I secured a decent job that allowed me to start saving for our wedding. We shared the wedding expenses equally and married when I was 23. However, the next 4 years of our marriage were rocky. Kevin frequently visited his parents and returned increasingly distant and upset. I knew Samuel and Charlotte continued to poison his mind, still branding me as a gold digger despite my pleas for him to reduce contact with them. Kevin persisted in seeing his parents often, and their negative influence began to deeply affect his view of our relationship. They convinced him that no one could truly love him for who he was. Despite my unwavering love over the years, Kevin's suspicion toward me never seemed to ease. The constant need to prove my sincerity became increasingly exhausting. The moment that truly tested us came on Kevin's birthday. Preferring a low-key celebration, we decided on a small cake party at our home, hoping to make his day special. I surprised Kevin with the expensive watch he had long admired. His excitement was palpable as he unwrapped it, but my heart sank when he suggested we show it off to his parents. Despite my hesitation, I reluctantly agreed. When we arrived, Kevin could hardly contain his enthusiasm. Mom, Dad, look at this beautiful watch Betty got me. I've wanted it for so long. Isn't it stunning? His pride was evident. Charlotte responded with a feigned surprise. Oh, Kevin, it seems she does love you after all. We were quite worried for a while. But Samuel quickly interjected. Don't be fooled, Charlotte. She's a gold digger. She married our son because of our $350,000 house. Let's not ignore the facts. I couldn't contain my frustration. Excuse me, why do you think I married your son for your house? I've been working and living in an apartment for years. If age was a concern, why would I marry someone older unless I truly loved him? I assure you, I didn't marry Kevin for his money or your house. I married him because I love him. Surely Kevin can confirm that, right? To my astonishment, Kevin remained silent. His reluctance to defend me in front of his accusing parents was deeply unsettling. I felt increasingly isolated as he avoided eye contact, sinking under their harsh assumptions. Pushed to my limit, I confronted him. Kevin, why aren't you saying anything? Your parents have always labeled me a gold digger. How will they ever see the real me if you don't speak up? Why are you so quiet? Tell them they're wrong. Kevin's hesitation was palpable. I don't know what you want me to say, Betty. Maybe my parents aren't completely wrong. There might be a possibility. His words trailed off, but the implication was clear. His doubt and inability to stand by me were more than just misunderstandings. They were a fundamental crack in our relationship, casting a shadow over our love and my place in his life. The birthday celebration quickly soared as I faced accusations. Are you serious right now, Kevin? You believe I married you for your assets? I asked, incredulous. His parents chimed in, their suspicion clear. Oddly enough, you've never talked about buying a house. Renting should be a temporary solution, not a long-term plan. You could never afford something like this on your own, so marrying Kevin and settling here seems more logical. Kevin looked at me with a mix of doubt and confusion. Yeah, Betty, why would you marry me? You might have feelings for me, but I think there's more to it than just love. I was left speechless by their words. All the love and affection I had felt for Kevin seemed to evaporate in an instant. While his parents' skepticism was hurtful, It was Kevin's agreement that cut the deepest. At that moment, I resolved to end our marriage. I didn't reveal my decision immediately. Instead, I waited for the right moment. Once Kevin and I were back home, I contacted a lawyer and began the divorce process. The lawyer assured me that everything would be prepared within a week. Meanwhile, I moved into a separate room, giving myself some space. Kevin thought I was merely cooling off and had no idea of my intentions. When the divorce papers were ready, I packed my belongings and left. Kevin, clearly distressed, called me in a panic. I told him to meet me at a specific address and to bring his parents. Despite his confusion, he complied. When they arrived, I was waiting on the porch of a stunning house. Their expressions shifted to surprise as they took in the scene. "You must be wondering why I brought you here," I said, gesturing to the luxurious surroundings. "It's a beautiful house, isn't it? No one can compare their home to this one. It's worth around $3 million in today's market. Quite expensive, right?" The dramatic setting was my way of showing them that their accusations and suspicions were unfounded. I wasn't the person they thought I was, and I needed to make that clear in the most unforgettable way. "But it's worth every penny," I continued, pointing to the lavish interior and furniture worth millions. "What is this place, Betty? I don't understand why you have access to such a house," Kevin asked, puzzled. "Why don't you all come in so we can talk properly?" I suggested, brushing off their astonishment as I led them inside. Their eyes widened in awe at the opulent decor that greeted us. The owners had spared no expense in furnishing the home. As we settled into the plush sofas, I took a deep breath, ready to address the elephant in the room. "I've made a decision, and that's why we're here," I said, handing Kevin the divorce papers. "We can proceed with an uncontested divorce if you agree." Kevin's voice was a mix of confusion and concern. "I don't understand. Why are you filing for divorce?" "It's simple," I replied, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. "You and your parents think I'm a gold digger. You believe I married you for your house and your money. Despite everything I've said, you've refused to listen. It's better for everyone if I leave, sparing you from what you deem my gold-digging tendencies." Kevin's face showed disbelief. "You're considering divorce just because my parents spoke what they believed to be the truth. That's ridiculous." "I think it's for the best," I replied firmly. His mother, watching the exchange with an unreadable expression, chimed in. "If she's so adamant, you should just sign the papers, Kevin. At least you can find someone who truly loves you." Kevin's suspicion grew. "Why did you bring us to this house, Betty? Do you expect me to buy this for you as part of our divorce settlement?" "Why would I need you to buy this house, Kevin? It's already mine," I answered calmly, watching their shock and disbelief unfold. They looked at me as if I were joking. "How on earth can you afford a house like this? You're renting, and your job isn't enough to cover something like this. Stop lying to us," Kevin's father demanded, his tone sharp with suspicion. Their disbelief was palpable, but I was ready to prove my independence and financial capability once and for all. "I'm not lying," I asserted firmly, meeting their incredulous looks. "Kevin, remember? When I mentioned that my parents had left me an inheritance, I explained that this house was part of it. It's held in a trust for now, but I will officially inherit it when I turn 31. I don't need to work a high-paying job because I have a trust fund waiting for me." "That's impossible," Kevin interjected, his confusion palpable. "Your parents passed away a long time ago. They should have given you the house earlier." "My parents anticipated potential exploitation," I explained. "They instructed me never to disclose the house or the trust fund. They wanted to protect me from people who might try to take advantage, so they put everything in a trust until I was older." Kevin's mother was astonished. "Oh my God, Betty, you should have told us about your wealth. We had no idea you owned such a sizable house. We could all live very comfortably here." "Yeah, you should have shared that sooner," Kevin added, looking relieved but somewhat embarrassed. "We thought you were after our house. We could have avoided all the misunderstandings." "I always knew Betty was perfect for Kevin," his father chimed in, his tone now markedly warmer. "She's a great woman. Look how wealthy she is." Kevin found a great match. Their attitudes had shifted so quickly that it was almost dizzying. Even more bizarre was how they seemed to forget about the divorce papers I had brought. I pulled them out, signed them, and said, "Here's my signature for an uncontested divorce. You can just sign these to finalize things. If you want to fight, we can take this to court, but I won't be living with you anymore." "Wait, Betty, listen to me. There's no need to rush this," Kevin pleaded. You've proven you're not a gold digger. There's no reason for a divorce anymore. We even apologize for the misunderstandings. That should make things better, right? Yes, Samuel is right, his mother added, her voice filled with regret. We're sorry we doubted you. Despite their apologies and sudden change of heart, the clarity of their initial judgments and accusations lingered in my mind. It reinforced my decision to leave a relationship where trust had to be constantly proved rather than freely given. I don't want your insincere apologies, I said firmly. For 3 years, you allowed your family to berate me and label me a gold digger. I expected you to defend me, but instead, you sided with them and even accused me of the same. I can't stay with someone who doesn't respect his wife. I'm done, Kevin. We can part ways amicably or involve the courts. The choice is yours. Charlotte and Samuel tried desperately to change my mind, pleading with me to overlook the past, but their lack of genuine remorse only fueled my anger. When I reached my breaking point, I demanded they leave before I called the police. My firm stance intimidated them, and they left without further argument. Over the next few weeks, Kevin and his parents continued to harass me. They begged, pleaded, and even offered bribes to persuade me to stay. Their belief that money could sway my decision only intensified my fury. It was a stark revelation of their persistent view of me as someone motivated by financial gain. Ironically, since Kevin co-owned the house with his parents, I was entitled to half of his share, which only fueled their desperation for reconciliation. Despite their relentless attempts, I remained steadfast in my decision to part ways. I relocated all my belongings to my parents' house, asserting my right to stay there even before officially taking ownership. Kevin and his parents persisted in their attempts to reach me, prompting me to change my phone number to avoid their constant calls. Kevin even attempted to discuss matters at my workplace, but security was informed in advance and asked them to leave. Kevin still hadn't signed the divorce papers, holding out hope for a change in my decision. Nearly a year has passed and the situation remains unresolved, a testament to the complexity and emotional depth of our entangled lives. With less than a year remaining until the legal process is concluded, I've managed quite well on my own, finding both happiness and financial stability. While I've gone on a few dates, I'm not considering anything serious at the moment. According to a cousin of Kevin, his family is now worried about having to pay me my rightful share of the house. The legal fees are mounting, and their savings are insufficient. Kevin is even advocating for selling the house, harboring resentment toward his parents for the upheaval they've caused in his life. At this point, I simply don't care about their dilemmas. My only goal is to be free from that toxic family and move on with my life, leaving the chaos and negativity behind.